What up, y'all? What's going on? We got another live today. Hope everybody's doing good, man. Look at Penny back there. Oh, look at her right there. My baby. She's just chilling. All right. Today yesterday we was talking about the stock market, and we're gonna get back into that. I'm actually gonna probably get into a position here. Probably gonna buy some probably sell some puts on pounds here the if everything looks like it was looking yesterday, there might be some opportunity there to make some money this month from that. Um, but with that being said, man, before we start that, I wanted to share something with you guys because I'm constantly consuming content on YouTube, and I do it to stay informed, but to also hear other perspective, other arguments, and evolve my thinking because my mind can be changed. And as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and as a husband and a father and and a man of God, you know, I got to know what's going on in this world because a lot of people depend on me. I'm responsible for a lot of things. And so I'm constantly paying attention. You guys know by now, if you've been checking out my live streams the past few weeks, that I'm constantly looking at current events and I'm looking at different arguments and I'm trying to just continue to grow, man. Um, and I believe that everything that's going on, whether it's politics, whether it's current events, even sports, man, it affects us in some way, shape, or form. So it's good to be informed. So, anyways, I really like Patrick Bet David, but I also like this guy, Channel 5 News, Andrew Callahan, and I like both of them. And they're completely different. Like Andrew Callahan is this amazing journalist that Yo Fonz put me on to, who he goes out there and he's getting raw content, real journalism, in my opinion. And his opinions on things have been shaped, but he's not the type of journalist that's very opinionated when he's making his content. One of the things I love about Andrew is that he will sit there and not say a word and let people talk for like 10 minutes straight. Joe said that the audience can get a feel of what's going on. It's really great, refreshing journalism. And a lot of the stuff that he's covering is things that are impacting us. He'll go to like different protests. He'll go undercover and actually look at like certain things. Like it's interesting. But recently he was on Patrick Bet David's podcast, and we've been reacting to some of PBD's podcasts. I love PBD as well. Everybody ain't perfect. People are critics of both of them, but they're definitely very unique. And seeing them on a podcast together, it was very interesting. And so I saw this guy's post, who I guess was reacting to it, and you guys can see the title here. It says Andrew Callahan obliterates millionaire Patrick Bet David. And I had seen some clips of this podcast, and I thought it was amazing. There was some parts where Andrew really had some thought-provoking arguments, and it was really, really good. It's amazing how two different perspectives can come together, and they weren't argumentative. You could tell that they were really. I mean, PBD definitely. There were some times where it seemed like he was setting him up for his argument, but nonetheless, it's good to have these arguments. And so he's just trying to make a point at the end of the day. But this guy, he goes on a rant and he's reacting to the podcast. And I just think that his commentary is immature. And I'm not trying to diss the guy, bro. I got nothing against you. I hate politics. I don't know his name, but I'm just giving you my opinion because you asked for it. So I commented on here. I said, I think you're wrong by a mile, to be honest. And it looked like immediately he got triggered. And I agree with the stance that you should offer why you disagree. I just didn't have the time to write it all out. It's a lot of shit. So I figured I would just wait and react to it. But his response was just like, okay, buddy, great job explaining why. So I said, you asked if we think you're wrong to let you know in the comments. But I'm happy to explain why if you want to. No need to get tight, bro. Well, usually in an adult conversation, we know to follow our opinion. So, he's dissing me. He's definitely being emotional, right? And all I said was, bro, it's a lot. I just gave him my response. I'm not trying to have gotcha moments here, but I'm going to respond. I'm going to react to all of his points. We'll start it from scratch. But this is why I commented on the post, because I caught this part.
one of my favorite parts right here. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Yes, I know you heard that before. That they are endowed by their creator, capital C,
Agreed.
with certain unalienable rights. That among
Yeah.
these are life, liberty, and here's the important part, the pursuit of happiness.
The
Yes,
pursuit of happiness.
not many people, just a very few. We may never completely get to that place of happiness, but it's a continuous journey. I'm 38
Yeah.
years old. I know you may not never get there, but the goal is to continuously, every day, step by step, is to get to that place, obviously. But the government's job, and this is my opinion, tell me in the comments if you think I'm wrong. Let me know.
That's what I heard.
Let me know. But my opinion, when it comes to the government and its people, which once again, the government serves a lot of, parts here. But one that that we're talking about here is the government is supposed to facilitate structures around the American people to keep them going on that journey. So if something happens, something out of your control or something even in your control, hey, let's just say you're one of those late bloomers and you just been screwing up your whole life, but you still have the energy and the willpower to continue. The government is supposed to be there to make sure that you don't hit rock bottom. The wealthiest.
And this is what I disagree with. It is not the government's job to make sure people don't hit rock bottom. People have free will. People are going to hit rock bottom no matter what you do for them. This is true in life. And all I was saying was, you said, let me know if you disagree. So I said I disagree. Now, with that being said, I'm going to react to all your points because you say some crazy shit, bro. You say some ridiculous stuff in this video. And so we're gonna start it from scratch. And I'll let you guys decide what you think.
What are we doing here? Get your mind out of your wallet. What? Come on, damn. And this right here is another reason why I hate politics. And of course I gotta somehow add that into
What up,
somewhere throughout my video, because that's my catch line right there. But this is one of the reasons why I kind of hate politics, is because a lot of people have that certain personality, and I'm pretty sure if you've been out there in the workforce, you've been around plenty of people growing up in high school, whatever the case is, a lot of people have that hammer mentality, just whatever the situation is, you treat it like a hammer. And of course, when everything looks like a nail to you, of course you just gonna hammer away. You know what I'm saying? In which at some point, some scenarios, that's a good idea. Trust me, I'm half of a hammer. I used to be like that. But when it comes to government, which, we're talking about politics, you can't manage, let's say, poverty the same way you do entrepreneurs or CEOs or industries or businesses throughout the country. You can't treat those two scenarios or those two
Why not?
roads the same.
Why?
You're not going to get the same outcome.
How?
So therefore, that's why, you surround yourself. You have people who are built a certain way to handle these certain situations. Obviously, you're not going to get, a basketball coach, someone
Apples
who
and oranges.
trains, newbies and professional basketball players and put them in golf. That's not going to work. It might be some overlays, but for the most part, he's going to be out of his element. That's not his zone.
This isn't apples and oranges, guys.
That's not his area. So when it comes to, Republicans' obsession of running America like a business, that's not going to work. And you're obviously going to run into.
So he keeps repeating the same thing, really offering no substance as to why. He's just making statements, and they don't really check out. But I'm open-minded, and I'm just gonna keep listening.
To some problems, of course. Like I got here, One, you can't, when you're in government, just like the post office, you can't, your number one goal can't be to expect profits. That's not how that works. You might get profits in a couple of years. You may not see profits until 10 years, or you may never see profit. But that's not your goal. Your goal is to serve your citizens. Your goal is to, of course, protect and all that. But when it comes to interacting with your citizens, your number one goal can't be profits. And that's what CEOs and these entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs, because everybody and their mamas entrepreneurs nowadays,
Are
that's
you?
all they look for.
Are you an entrepreneur? To generalize entrepreneurs and say all they care about is profits, when more than half of America's jobs are created by small business owners, when the majority of people who create jobs are regular people like you and I. We generalize all entrepreneurs as if they're all billionaires.
That's all that matters to them. But you can't see people, you can't see their circumstances or what they're going through as profit. Because then you're going to be turning everybody, you're going to be turning 99% of Americans away, and you're going to be catering to the 1%. Yes. And one quote from the Declaration of Independence, if you don't know what that is,
This guy really thinks the 1% is entrepreneurs.
go ahead, Google that after this video so you can kind of get caught up on it. But throughout the top, I believe it's the second paragraph, one of my favorite parts right here. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Yes, I know you heard that before.
So we heard this part already. And so I just wanted to tell you guys what our government is responsible for. According to our Constitution, it is to create a stronger, united nation. I agree with that. I love that about our country. It ain't been perfect, but we, the people, have fought to evolve this, to perfect this over time. And it's gotten better and better and better, I believe. Especially compared to Jim Crow and all those eras before that. Women couldn't vote, and I mean, we have evolved a lot. It's to create laws and systems that are fair and uphold justice. It's not perfect by any means, but I dare you to go to where my family's from and see how the justice system is there. The majority of countries do not have a justice system as good as America does. And a lot of countries are using America's justice system as an example of what they strive to be. Maintain peace and order within the country. It's rocky in this country, but I think we've done a fairly good job. It's rocky, but what I love about our country is people can voice their opinions more than any other country. If people had the same rights in other countries that Americans have, don't you think there would be more protesting, more rioting, more criticisms of governments around the world? But in most countries, if you, even in developed Western countries, if you criticize the government, you go to jail. That's not the case here. You can literally make a rap song saying F the president, and it go platinum, and you become rich from it, and nothing happens to you. Okay? Our government's job is to protect the country from external threats. Nobody in the world does a better job of that. And we act entitled, and a lot of times we don't appreciate not just us, but other countries that benefit from our military, like Canada, like the European countries, like the UK, like Mexico, like Caribbean islands, like all of these countries that benefit from that, and they don't pay their fair share into NATO, right? Support conditions that benefit all citizens, like infrastructure, health, economy. And this guy seems to think that we don't do, that America doesn't do for the poor. And that's where I disagree as well. Again, I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying we can't do better. But I think that every day we're passing policies to try to do better. And I'll explain more in just a bit. And then to protect the freedoms and rights of current and future generations, which is something that I think we're trying to do every day. When you see what we're trying to do to erase the deficit, when you see what we're trying to do to bring interest rates down so people can afford homes again, um, it's again not a perfect system, and it's going to be volatile no matter what. But I do think between the Federal Reserve, our government, and the people, we try to do our best to make sure we protect freedoms and rights of current and future generations. Okay. Um, so, anyways, let's continue.
That
I'm
they
gonna skip
are
this part
endowed,
because we
and I
already heard it.
never get there, but the goal is to me know structures around the American people to keep them going on that journey. So if something happens, something out of your control or something even in your control, hey, let's just say you're one of those late bloomers and you've just been screwing up your whole life, but you still have the energy and the willpower to continue. The government is supposed to be there to make sure that you don't hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
The wealthiest country in the world, we should not be hitting rock bottom.
So
That's
let me
not
ask you. So let me ask you. If this is true, if it's true that 30% of the homeless population suffers from a severe mental illness, if it's true that over 50% of the homeless in America suffer from substance abuse disorders or untreated traumas, or they have criminal records like they're pedophiles or they killed somebody, and for whatever reason they have criminal records that keep them from holding high paying jobs. Okay, aside from what the government already does, how do we help these people? We have churches, we have nonprofits that get government funding. Did you know that our government spends $1.3 trillion, over a quarter of our federal of our federal budget, on welfare programs? How do you solve this issue? What does that have to do with greedy billionaires and entrepreneurs and the 1%? You can't solve that issue. Just like as an entrepreneur, as a businessman who has employees that complain about money, but they never show up to work. How do I solve that problem? People also have to meet you halfway and want the help. It's much more complex. Like, I think this guy's very compassionate, and I think he's noble for caring and being empathetic, but it's immature, man. It's unrealistic. The complaints, and all it is word salad, and it's complaining about shit that we all have concerns about and we want to fix. But the people who are actually trying to fix it, they know the information, and entrepreneurs know all of this information. How come you don't know this stuff, bro?
the math.
Because you're passionate about it and you're saying the math doesn't math, but it does.
Don't be mathing like that. How we the richest country, and we got millions of people living under the poverty line. That doesn't make.
Okay, that's another one that's just another immature argument. Okay, there is a relative poverty line and there's an absolute poverty line. So let me explain some things to you. In America, 90% of the people under the poverty line have AC. There are developed countries. Most developed countries don't have AC. It is rare you go anywhere in Europe and they got AC, central AC, like you see here in America. 90% of people under the poverty line have cell phones, have a vehicle, a car, yeah, have flat screen TVs, have brand name shoes. 90% of people under the poverty line. That is what is called relative poverty lines. And in America, our standard is so high that even our poorest people are still in the top 10 and 15% of income earners, or have a lifestyle in the top 15% of the world. Because when it comes to the absolute poverty line, America ain't even we're not even in the stratosphere of poverty. The fact that our 90% of people on the poverty line have refrigerators, running hot and cold water, electricity, Wi-Fi, microwaves, flat screens, cell phones, cars, AC, a roof over their head, not a damn cardboard box, not an aluminum, a neighborhood of aluminum roof housing with cardboard for walls. We're not giving America enough credit. And I think it's noble what you're saying, bro. But even you, look at the background of your crib, bro. You are rich. You should be able to find happiness. Your happiness has nothing to do with money. If you have all those things that you have be our poor people in America have more than the bare necessities. Now, could we do better? Absolutely. And we will do better. This is America. We will do better and we should push for higher standards. But I don't think anything you're saying is productive. And you're not really giving any substance, bro. But let's continue.
Doesn't make any sense. So the government's job is to make sure that you don't have to work 2, 3 jobs just to still barely make it. That should be illegal.
The government's job is to, bro, it is our job. It is our job to vote for the right policies. And we're seeing it. And we're seeing it. Look, right now, you see crazy interest rates. Why do we have crazy interest rates? Because people had so much money with these stimulus checks, with all this shit we were doing during the pandemic, and the consumer spending was getting so out of control that inflation was skyrocketing, and they had to increase interest rates to stop consumers from spending so much because inflation was getting out of control. Affordability was crashing for the average American person. So what did the Federal Reserve do? What is the government trying to do? They're trying to make things more affordable. You're speaking on things that are being done right now, but it doesn't happen overnight. And it's not just the government jobs. It's our job as a nation, as a union.
You feel me? You should be able to work your 40-hour job. You got a life. You got kids. You got things that you want to do. You shouldn't be having to spend 80 hours at work to still barely make it. That's not how that works. So the government is supposed to be there to make sure you don't hit rock bottom and to supply. Hey, trust me, I got a list here. Food security. Not every job is going to pay, 40, 50 bucks an hour. So if you are working a restaurant job or a thrift store job and it's not paying, a livable wage, which, some circumstances I get why, some jobs can't pay that. But the government should be providing food. We're humans. We need food.
The government doesn't provide food for people in need. They don't provide. Listen, I was poor. I used to work at Boston. I used to work 2 jobs at Boston Market and at Arby's. And I went to barber school at night. I was working and going to school, 20 hours a day, it felt like. Barely sleeping. I had a wife. I had a child. My wife had a minimum wage job. We were struggling to make ends meet. But we got affordable housing. We got WIC. We got food stamps. We got help. It's not a perfect system. There are people who get left behind for whatever reason. We need to do a better job. Don't get me wrong. But we do help people who are in need. It's just not designed to be dependent on this stuff. Okay? And here's the other thing. You're giving out compassionate arguments that are anecdotal and they're just not real. Because the average poor household, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, I just fact checked you, they work 30 to 40 hours a week. That's not saying that many don't have multiple jobs. I was one of those people. I was definitely one of those people. But you also don't have to rely on those. It's a struggle to get to a certain point. But I knew going into it that I wasn't going to build a career being a food prep at Boston Market. and I wasn't going to build a career making sandwiches at at um at Arby's. And as a matter of fact, I learned how to work my way up in Arby's, and I did everything I could to get raises, to work my way up. And in a couple years, I became the assistant manager at the store, and then the general manager at the store. It's available to people, but I also worked around a lot of people who didn't want to work. The majority didn't want to work, and they were happy and they were good, and you couldn't force them to drink the water, no matter how much motivation you poured into them. It doesn't mean that they're not happy. These people were happy. They happy. A lot of them are. But I do get your argument. I just think that the data, you said math ain't mathin'. It ain't mathin', bro. Right? Now, do we need to increase minimum wage? Absolutely. Do we need do we need salaries to increase and keep up with inflation? Absolutely. But you work those two things from both angles. We need the Federal Reserve, and we need our government to pass policies and help with slowing down inflation so that we can help salaries catch up. But if we don't do what we're doing with affordability, with the housing, inflation is going to stay up like this, and you're never going to be able to catch up with salaries, with people's with minimum wage. So you have to stabilize inflation. You have to decrease it so that if, let's say, inflation is at 2-3% and salaries are going up 6-7% a year, then we can catch up and we can get to a livable wage. It takes time. Guess who understands this stuff? Entrepreneurs, businessmen, people who pay attention to the economy, who actually create the jobs, people who actually create the systems that allow for people in poverty to have flat screen TVs, to make it accessible, where a lot of this shit is not accessible to 90% of the world, right? Yeah.
Ooh, duh. You know what I'm saying? Housing. The government should be able to provide at least some sort of accommodation for that. Because
At least.
obviously you're not making enough. And depending where you live at, you may not have job opportunities like that. Job security. Create jobs. The government should be able to create jobs or put people into jobs to where they can do better.
All right, there's a couple things here that are crazy to me, because there's 11 million people that live under the poverty line in America. 10.4 million people get some type of housing assistance, whether it's Section 8, whether it's affordable public housing, whether it's affordable base rental assistant housing, or there's other programs like USDA loans, FHA loans, things like that. There are so many people that the government helps and subsidizes so that they have housing. That's why most people under the poverty line in America have a damn house, a roof over their head. And that's why the majority of people who are homeless, it isn't because they don't have access to housing, bro.
For themselves. Trust me.
And the other thing that he said is that the government's job is to provide jobs. Dude, part of the reason why we have a low unemployment, let me show you something. Let me show you something. How this works. Okay? If I can get this thing to work. There it goes. So, let's say you have unemployment that's 4.5% right now, which is the case right now. Right? Unemployment, all right, is at 4.5%. And the federal government has 3 million jobs. They are responsible, the federal government, this isn't even the state or local government. This is just the federal government is responsible for 3 million jobs. Okay? These federal jobs are paid for by taxpayers. Go do some research on how many Americans pay taxes. The answer is 50%, which means 50% of Americans do not pay taxes, which is much more than just the poverty line, which is much more than just poor people. It's poor and middle class people. They don't pay any taxes. And you might say, yeah, but there's billionaires that don't pay taxes either. Some, but guess what? 50% of taxes are paid by people who make $100,000 a year or more. Where people who make anywhere from 400,000 and up pay the majority of this 50% in taxes. And guess what's providing these 3 million federal government jobs? The people you're talking shit about that pay taxes. And so, look, if these people aren't making any money because unemployment is high, guess what jobs get lost? The jobs that are created by the taxpayers who aren't paying taxes anymore. And what you end up having is a broken system. If the federal government's job is to create jobs, that's not sustainable. That's what you end up getting, a Cuba. That's what ends up happening, is you turn into Cuba. So this isn't realistic, bro. It's not the government's job to provide jobs. It's the government's job to do exactly what we said in the beginning, which is to create laws and systems that are fair and uphold justice, create a stronger, united nation, maintain peace and order, protect the country from external threats, support conditions that benefit all citizens, and protect the freedoms and rights of current and future generations. That's it. Have you created any jobs, bro? Have you created any jobs? Because I've created 134 jobs. Right now, 134 people earn a living because of the businesses that I built as an entrepreneur. And I'm involved in local politics because it's important to our businesses, whether it's property taxes, whether it's permitting, all of these things, right? Entrepreneurs have to pay attention to this stuff. They are literally the people who are impacted the most by government policies. No, no, that's not the case anymore. And you're still trying to fund a broken system. My bad. You guys can't even see my screen. Listen to this
Create
part.
jobs. The government should be able to create jobs or put people into jobs to where they can do better for themselves. Trust me, I'm 38. I done been looking for jobs when I was younger that would support me and my family, but it's hard. It's hard out there for a pimp. Education. You get better education, supposedly on paper. You get better education. You should be able to get a better job, right?
No.
So the government should be investing into their people to get these better jobs. So guess what?
Does the government not do that? You have the SBA, the Small Business Administration. You have all kinds of state level programs to help people get education. But here's the thing. You're still trying to fund an outdated system. Education, we've seen this a million times, and we've said this a million times. It's not just education, it's the type of education that you get. And so why are we still funding all of these educations that don't equate to a better paying job? And why do you want to continue to fund that? We know, our public school system is broken, it needs reform. Okay? Let's figure that shit out first. But I agree. I think everybody should graduate high school with a trade. I went to a technical Nature Coast Tech, and there you could graduate with a trade. You can graduate with your barber's or cosmetology license. You can graduate as an electrician. You can graduate as a mechanic with all kinds of certifications and stuff. I do think that's important because that does translate right away to the workforce. But just saying education, that's just, again, it's noble, but it's immature, it's so surface level, you don't even realize that that's not the issue.
We can spend more money in our economy. Hey, economy 101. In daycare, of course. We
Economy
got
101.
kids. America love the kids, right? Well, help me with my kids if I need that type of assistance. If I'm a single parent or I'm having a new kid, help me with my life when it comes to raising a kid. That's essential. But of course, when it comes to business people, they don't see it like that. They don't care about your personal life. They just want to see you clock in, overwork you, and clock out. That's it. That's all they care about. And when it comes to, hey, here we go. When it comes to clowns like this,
Clowns
Patrick
like this.
Davis.
Bro. So let's go back to this whiteboard. He said all entrepreneurs and business owners care about is you clocking in, clocking out. Let's go a whole nother level. If the majority of taxpayers are those entrepreneurs that are making 100,000, 200,000, 400, 600,000 or better, okay? And 50% of America doesn't pay taxes, okay? And all of these federal jobs depend on this, okay? How do these entrepreneurs make the money to be able to pay these taxes? To have the type of tax bills that they have? They have to sell a business. They have to have a business that sells a product or a service. And who is the consumer of that product or that service? It is the American people, right? Of which we know 50% of don't pay taxes. But if these American people do not consume, if they cannot afford anything, if interest rates are too high, what does that do? It slows spending. And what does slow spending do to these rich people who are the majority of taxpayers? They make less money. Of course they care how the economy is doing, how people are doing. And of course I'm not saying there aren't crazy stories of business owners and entrepreneurs that take advantage of their employees. That's why unions exist. That's why HR exists. All of these, that's why there are safety nets in place. That's why there's regulation in place. And that's part of the government's job, is to make sure that there's fairness, right? But that doesn't mean it's the government's job to provide these things, to create it. Okay? And so again, it's all an entire ecosystem, and it's not perfect. There's going to be exceptions to the rule. There's going to be, entrepreneurs that are terrible business owners, terrible leadership skills. But the best companies, and most companies are really good, they have culture, they have leadership, they have ways for people to grow and earn a better salary and be able to pay for a living. And you know how we know this? Because the majority of people in America are not under the poverty line. That's how we know this. The majority of people, unfortunately now, most of the time can afford a home. Now it's tough because of inflation and interest rates, but they had to do that in order to slow down inflation so that we can have a better long-term economy. So again, it's so much more complex than this. That's why I disagree, bro. Nothing against you.
Stick to people who are making, multi-billion dollars every year.
How about, let's say, billionaires and up?
Okay.
What does a rich billionaire buy? What things do they buy?
Well, what first thing that comes to mind for me is a pool, like an infinity pool that bleeds directly into the Pacific Ocean.
Beautiful.
A fleet of jet skis for all of my friends.
Okay.
So we can kind of travel.
I love it. Go, bro.
Corporate real estate on the water, so we can jet ski from the house to work.
I love it. This is like Larry Ellison. You ever seen Larry Ellison's headquarters?
No.
And I don't really care about this part that he's looking up, but I'll get back to the conversation. But it's kind of funny, and I don't, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I don't think Patrick here understands like the flaw in his own questioning here. Like, when you're a billionaire, of course you're gonna splurge on the most craziest, most outlandish things that you can think of. Of course. That's your money. Go ahead and do what you want to do.
There aren't billionaires that are donating all of their money. There aren't hundreds of billionaires that are donating all of their money.
But when you're a regular citizen, hey, guess what? Guess what I want, baby? Guess what I want? I want one day when I'm driving to work, because I'm driving on time. I'm never late. And my check-in engine light goes off. And I go ahead and check that. It says, hey, you need an oil change. I want to be able to get paid and get my oil changed in time. I shouldn't have to prioritize like, oh my God, like I'm gonna have to move this around and I'm gonna have to pay this late, or I'm gonna have to somehow switch this up and maybe pay this late too. And
this is American people for you guys. Really? That's the government's fault? That's the government's fault? Look, I own an accounting firm. We have 335 clients and 24 employees, okay, in my accounting firm. And we do much more than just taxes and bookkeeping. We help our clients build wealth. We help them create a budget. It's called pieaccounting.com. And I see why people struggle. We have people that make six figures or that make $70,000 a year or make $50,000 a year. And all of them are struggling for the same reasons. And it's their budgeting. It's got nothing to do with whether or not they can afford a freaking oil change. And a lot of them can't. They say the average American would have financial strains if they got a flat tire, a $400 bill. That has to do with how much money they make and whether or not the government is helping enough? No, it doesn't. We are such pussies in this country, bro. When I look at the budgeting, when I look at a client's budget, it typically is they have a brand new car with bad credit, and they're paying $1,000 a month for a Camry. And then they're eating out 2 to 3 times a day at all these restaurants that people in the majority of countries have no access to. Every single day, they're spending $50 eating out every single day, times 30. That's $1,500 that they're spending on fast food. So you're already at $2,500 and you have rent. And you go out on the weekends. And you do this and you do that. You think that's the government's fault? That you can't afford your oil change? That you can't afford a vacation? Man, this shit is...
2-3 months later, then, when I'm not panicking and not having anxiety attacks, thinking my car gonna break down any second, that, then I can pay to get my oil changed.
This is such a
just
weak
simple
mindset,
things
bro.
like that. Regular folks, probably you
part of the
watching,
problem, bro.
that's what we want. I want to be able to pay my bills on time and not have to worry about moving money around. You see what I'm saying?
And that's the
Squeezing
government's
$1
fault.
out of 15 cents. I'm a professional at that at this point. But of course, Patrick and his dumbass scenarios here never get to the point of anything.
What else? So far, we got infinity pool on the water at the Pacific, Ocean. Lord. You got jet skis, and then you have a corporate real estate on the water to jet ski from office to the house.
Yeah,
What
personal
else?
trainer, private chef,
Personal trainer.
nutritionist,
Private chef, nutritionist,
dermatologist to live on scene to help me with my skin problems.
dermatologists. Love it. We need these dermatologists. Who else?
I can't even think about it. I just know that once you pass a certain amount of money, it becomes a competition as to who can get the
But
most
give
flashy
me more,
thing.
bro. Go greedy. What else is this billionaire going to buy?
Okay.
I want more. Get creative.
Okay, well, I'm
Is he
trying to
gonna
think
have
what
a
kind of
helicopter?
billionaire. Am I a tech billionaire or am I like a Saudi royal family member?
Give me both.
Okay. I can't even think of anything else.
I love Andrew.
Okay, let's just say private jet. Is that fair?
Yeah.
You for sure have a private jet. Let's just say yacht.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a vacation home?
Yeah, in Santa Fe.
In Santa Fe.
Oh, no, that's where Jeffrey Epstein had.
Ooh,
I got to
that's
pick somewhere
rough.
else. I gotta
Go
pick
Santa
that.
Fe.
I scratched that.
That's tough.
I have a vacation home.
Gene Hackman, like,
on the west coast of Jamaica, Westmoreland Parish.
holy shit, good taste.
Yeah.
What else? What else do you do to hoard the money? Where do you hoard your money?
You can just sit on it.
What do you sit on? Like what bank?
Well, what a
what
lot of billionaires
institution?
do is they use their money to kind of like use the legal system, civil court in particular, to bully people who talk badly about them.
Yeah, but that's like
That's like
happening to me right
1%
now.
of the
yeah,
1%.
I get that part.
That's
But I'm saying,
1%
what
of
do
the
they buy?
1%.
But let's even say that. So that means they hire a PR
1%
from
of the
lawyers,
1%.
right?
Billionaires
So
put their money in funds that do what? How do you think small business owners go get loans? Real estate investors. Like, I'm not talking about BlackRock or billionaires. I'm talking about your neighbor who flips homes. Where do you think they get that funding from? It's not traditional banks, because most homes that need flipping can't even qualify for a regular mortgage because they need to be fixed. It comes from private equity funds, from funds that are funded by who? It ain't poor people. It ain't middle class. You see, we keep giving these headline stories, which are big deals, and we make it like that's the general consensus of every billionaire. And I'm not defending billionaires. There's plenty of bullshit. Our country has become a bureaucracy with billionaires funding politicians and all this stuff. I get that argument, and I'm with you on that. But this idea that the system isn't working, it's not true. The majority of billionaires are working within the system.
do they hire PR firm?
Or we already know that they hide their money into stocks and then they live off, I forget the term, but they live off those stocks. I forget the word, but man, I wish someone would. Hey, that's
Yes, they can also put their money in a fund in stocks in the marketplace and live on the interest that those dividends print out. But guess who else does that? And it's a very small amount, don't get me wrong, but where do you think the money in your 401k is? Where do you think the money in your IRA, Roth IRA is? It's in those funds. If billionaires pulled their money out, what do you think that would do to your money, to your retirement account, to your pensions, right? And so this whole argument that people say that billionaires don't pay their fair share, guys, take a look at this. The top 1% of income earners pay 42% of the federal income tax in this country. The top 1%. The top 5%, 62% of the federal income taxes. The bottom 50% pretty much pay nothing. That's the point I'm trying to make. Like, this whole idea that the system's not working, it is. And every time they say there's a headline that billionaires aren't paying taxes, that is the exception to the rule. That's just not the truth. That's the math is mathing.
That's what they do with the rest of their money. And then they live off the loans they get from the bank. So they don't really spend their own money like that. I mean,
okay, and when money is created through debt, so when a billionaire or a wealthy person goes and gets a loan, sure, they don't pay taxes, but you know what that does? That increases our economy. That increases liquidity in the marketplace, and it increases our GDP. It's helpful in certain times. In times where interest rates are up, billionaires aren't racing to go get loans because it's expensive to get money. And so what the Federal Reserve is trying to do is they're trying to make it expensive for people to go get loans, whether you're rich or you're poor, so that less money is being printed and inflation slows down. But when the economy's good, billionaires go get loans, and what do they do with that money? That debt has to get serviced. It's not like they just get the loan and they don't have to make interest payments. Like, they don't have to make payments. They have to create something that creates the cash flow to pay for the debt. And by doing that, what do they have to do? They either have to create businesses, which create jobs, or they have to create housing, which creates housing. Like, it's, oh man, I don't know why people are so surface level and so compassionate about their argument. Like, I get it's noble what you're saying, bro, and I think we're on the same page. At the end of the day, we want what's best for everyone. We don't, I don't think there's anybody that would say if we can erase homelessness 100%, we wouldn't want that.
I mean, that's pretty common sense at this point. So, but of course, Patrick's not going to be honest.
Okay. Do they buy expensive watches?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I personally wouldn't buy a watch.
But they probably do it.
Yeah.
Crazy. I don't know why they do this kind of stuff. What else? What else?
And by the way, this number right here, where the top 1% pays for 42% of income taxes and the top 5% pay for 62, okay? This doesn't even cover payroll taxes. Who's paying payroll taxes? 8% of it is your employer. So that's even more in taxes. What about property taxes? Who's paying those?
What else do these guys buy?
I feel like I'm being set up right now. Where does this end?
That's what I mean by PBD.
If there's something that I don't know about billionaires, I want you to tell me.
And I think Andrew is he's operating in good faith, and PBD is a little bit more so argumentative, which I don't love, you know.
I tell you what it is. Here's how I process it. So if they have an infinity pool, does it have to be maintained?
Yeah, but okay, I see what you're saying. There is pool staff that needs to make sure the water there's not too much chlorine going into the ocean.
Do they have to be maintained though? Somebody has to take care of it on a weekly basis. To build an infinity pool, Rob, how much put average price of building an infinity pool in Malibu?
So essentially his whole I guess point of his questioning is, when billionaires want to splurge and ball out of control, you're going to need regular people to maintain and filling these positions like a personal chef. Okay. Now, a lot of these jobs, if you're just maintaining a pool, you're not going to live off that. You're not going to be your own little mini millionaire off that. A lot of
You see what I'm saying? I don't think this guy has ever built a business. I don't think this guy has, and I could be wrong, but I don't think he's ever created a job in his life. And he's speaking on this and calling people dumbasses and clowns and all this shit. And how could you say, one of my best friends has a pool cleaning business. I have 2 pools that I own because I have 2 rental properties that both have pools. It costs me for those 2 pools about $300 a month to maintain them, okay, for 2 pools. But if you're a billionaire, you got an infinity pool and all that, it's going to cost you $300 a month for 1 pool, okay? And a lot of these guys have routes, have a customer base of over 100 pools, guys. So do the math on that. If you're, let's say, in Malibu, where there's a lot of infinity pools, okay, and you have 100 clients paying you $300 a month, that is $30,000 a month. You can't have a livable wage and create jobs with that. And then what about the people who build the pools? Your average pool these days, just to build one's $100,000. How many jobs do these pool builders create? Construction is one of the biggest job providers in this nation. Of course it creates jobs and livable wage jobs. And private chefs too, they make bank. What are you talking about?
Constructing these type of things like an infinity pool, a lot of these construction workers don't get paid that much. Trust me. I used to be a construction worker.
Trust me.
I used to create things and tear things down. So I wasn't
just
balling.
because you did it and you had an anecdotal experience doesn't mean you did it right, bro. We hear all the times barbers don't make money. I have 100 barbers. All of them are making 6 figures or close to it. And you have plenty of barbers that'll tell you can't make money as a barber because they don't do it right. They don't even treat it as a profession. It's like you barely even tried, and you're trying to use your example as a general consensus. It's crazy.
Out of control, and this was back in 2017. You know what I'm saying? When you're getting paid like 22, 23 an hour, like that seems like a lot, but you ain't moving to the Bahamas. You ain't moving to Colorado Springs.
What does that have to do? Your original argument was it's the government's job to make sure that people can have an opportunity to the pursuit of happiness. And you're talking about how a pool job should be able to get you a vacation home in the Bahamas or in Colorado Springs. Oh my gosh, bro. I'm losing brain cells, man. No offense to you, bro. No offense to you, man, but this is, and this guy has 33,000 subscribers, bro.
Really nice. But anyway, so I think his point is still flat.
And he deserves, I'm not knocking him like that. My bad. I apologize for that. You deserve your subscribers. Obviously, you have content where you make solid points, and I haven't seen that other content. It's just a miss here for me. And the only reason why I'm reacting this way is because of how you treated me based on the comment that I made. You were triggered and all that good stuff. But, I genuinely, if you change your mind or if I watch a piece of content of yours that changes my mind, I'm all for it. You know what I mean? And this could just be one bad take and everything else on your channel is amazing. So I do got to give you that benefit of the doubt.
Flat here. Oh yeah, billionaires are creating jobs, but these jobs are not high quality paying jobs. Show me not a water boy, but a pool boy where he's making, $80,000 a year, a livable wage, not 40, 50.
There are plenty of pool cleaning jobs that pay a livable wage. Plenty.
$1,000 a year, especially in Colorado.
Let me show you guys something. And look, again, I own an accounting firm, so I can 100% say I am very, very confident in that most of this, I know that this data is usually off, not inflated, but deflated. Usually it's about 20% more than this. But a lot of people who file their taxes, they do not include cash, or they write off more than they're really supposed to. We know this for a fact as somebody who owns an accounting firm. Okay. So if you look at my screen, you can see that the average swimming pool installer average annual salary is almost $70,000 a year. It ranges from $64,000 to $101,000. And we know that it's probably more than that. So again, bro, you have to do your research when you're making these claims, because what we end up doing is we start to create solutions as a nation, as citizens in this country, for problems that don't exist, instead of focusing on real problems and creating solutions for those. Guess who thinks that way? Entrepreneurs.
Colorado, you barely making it with that. So once again, Pat, that doesn't prove nothing. These billionaires are creating low quality jobs. Great job. Okay.
Malibu. Okay, let's
skip all his
150.
Billionaires are creating low quality jobs. Think of the billionaires that you know. Jeff Bezos. The guy who created Costco, Tesla, Meta, Silicon Valley. I'm not saying there aren't billionaires that create low quality jobs. Sure, Walmart has historically created low quality jobs, but even Walmart employees that are under the poverty, that none of them are under the poverty line. They may not be buying a vacation home in the Bahamas or Colorado Springs, but they all got flat screens, they all drive cars, they all have a roof over their head, and they all have an opportunity to the pursuit of happiness. Because money does not equal happiness. We all know this, number one. Bro, my family in Colombia and Puerto Rico, they don't have AC, they don't even have windows, and they happier than most people in America. We know that that's true. They might not have all the materialistic things that we have, but they're happy. And I'm not saying that, again, I'm telling you, America's standard is much higher. And we should be wanting people to be able to afford more. That helps everyone, right? But Walmart also has entry-level jobs, but they also have jobs that you can work into. Corporate jobs, management jobs, jobs that you can grow in. And they also have programs where they'll pay for your schooling. I used to work at Walmart. So sure, when you enter, it's entry level and it's not the best job. You're probably going to not be in the middle class. You're probably going to be poor, but you're still going to have the opportunity to the pursuit of happiness. Absolutely.
You're creating a job.
And
right?
you need to get 6 to 8 so that you and your core employees can commute to
corporate created, right? If you have a private personal trainer, that's a job you're creating.
Yeah.
If you have a chef, that's a job you're creating.
Okay, I get the point you're trying to make.
Yeah.
People should be able to get nice things for themselves if they work super hard.
But that's
I'm not the kind of guy who's
Yeah.
like, if you work hard, the specific tax rate should be a little bit higher. Not ridiculously higher, but higher enough to where they can have substantial social welfare programs.
My biggest challenge with that is even the greediest of the greediest who goes and is like flaunting a big ass platinum gold chain that they're putting around their neck that they bought for whatever that somebody took 3 months to build. No matter what it is, the money is flowing. Even if they put the money in the bank.
I think also with the quality of jobs, we usually associate money with the quality of jobs. You should see low quality jobs in other countries. And again, that's not to give America an excuse. I'm just saying we are going in the right direction, and it doesn't happen overnight. Okay? The other thing is, like, I brought up the tech companies and stuff like that, but there's also indirect jobs that are created because of the billionaires, right? So for example, we know Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, Apple, they create hundreds of thousands of high-paying tech, engineering, design, logistics, management roles. But we also know a lot of people ain't going to school for that stuff. It's people overseas that are going to school for stuff. And they have all these programs to bring migrants over, which are cool, but why aren't more Americans filling these roles? And it's really a choice. You know, you talk about education and stuff, and people are choosing to educate themselves in other things because they don't necessarily want these jobs. And that's fine too. That's part of the pursuit of happiness. You should do things that you want to make money in. There's a million ways of doing it. Sometimes it's not from an employer. Sometimes you got to have a YouTube channel doing things you love to do to be able to monetize it. Guess where that's possible and not possible in mostly anywhere else, right? Because of billionaires creating platforms like this, right? I mean, who offers more six-figure salaries than Microsoft and Google? Not just that, but the indirect jobs. Construction grows, real estate grows, factories grow, startups grow because of these secondary jobs creating indirectly from the billionaire ecosystem. Okay. And then there's innovation-driven employment. You know, if it wasn't for innovation from billionaires, right? If it wasn't for that innovation, we would still be having jobs, farming jobs. Like the majority of people would still be doing agriculture, would still be doing manufacturing, like what you see in China. But there's only a 4.5% unemployment rate here in America. And the majority of our jobs are service jobs in the AC in front of a computer. That's the majority of American jobs, and you can look it up. So quality jobs, it's not just the wages, it's also the lifestyle.
Bank and they're sitting on it. The bank is lending it back to somebody. So money's always working. Chase is not going to let money stay in the bank.
Yeah.
The moment you put money in Chase, guess what Chase is doing? Chase is lending it to somebody ASAP. They don't want the money to stay in the bank. They're not making.
Technically, I mean, if we really want to get into the details, banks are not just lending money to everybody. I mean, we've seen plenty of stores where banks are.
If banks lent money to everyone, our economy would go bankrupt. Because most people can barely manage a credit card. And it's not even because they can't afford it. Again, I own an accounting firm. A lot of times it's literally just discipline. Running up their credit cards for stupid stuff.
Like literally denying people because they don't see a high profit into loaning out to these people.
That is not true. There are startup loans left and right. It's deeper than that. Most people who are self-employed don't have tax returns. Most people have jacked up credit. Like, you're not entitled to these loans. You have to at least meet the bare minimum, and it's not hard to do. Make your credit card payments on time. Pay some taxes. 50% of Americans don't pay taxes, which means they're either lying or they just don't make enough money to do it, which when we look at the data, the math don't math there. A lot of times they're just not reporting enough because they don't want to pay taxes. And so if you can't show tax returns that show that you make a certain amount of money, why would a bank lend you money if they don't think you can pay it back, bro? This isn't a freaking a nonprofit, man. Like, and even if it was, it's not a charity.
You see what I'm saying? So like, I don't know why he's depending on, shit, or maybe it's just me reading into it, but like,
as a matter of fact, most people, if they just get their credit score to a 6 something, you can get a no doc loan or a statement only credit card with 0 interest and go start a business with it. But most people won't use their credit cards to do that. Or their loans to do that. They'll go buy a nice car. They'll go book a vacation. They'll go buy a Louis Vuitton bag. I remember when the pandemic hit, seeing lines wrapped around Louis Vuitton, and it's people that was there that had no business being there. Had no business being there.
Bank loans? Really? That's what you're hanging your hat on. Bank loans. But Mr. Andrew, he's going to get to a good point.
Have you ever taken a bank loan, bro?
Money like that. Mm-hmm. So no matter what you do, the basis of
money is literally created by debt. It's literally created by debt. The Federal Reserve will print money, and the way that they get money into the economy is by giving out debt. And a lot of it is subsidized by the government through SBA, through FHA, through USDA, through different economic hardship programs, a lot of it. That's how they get the money into the system, into the economy. And people who get the money, the goal is to build more infrastructure, to use entrepreneurs, to use regular people like you and I to fund more infrastructure being built, whether that's research and development, whether that's housing and real estate, whether that's businesses to create more jobs. And so they're hoping that this money will help increase the GDP in this country. That's how it works. You have to go to banks and get money to get money. We're not on the gold standard anymore where you got to take money from this guy in order to get your own money. It's not how it works anymore.
Of this question for me goes, who's going to do better with the money? Giving it to the government, because you said what right after when I said taxes, you said in California, what did you say? Let me go back to it. You said in California,
this is a strong point.
The taxes that you're paying for.
Who does better with our money? Yourself? Are you going, look, if more people did for themselves, the government wouldn't have so much strain and have to have so much federal dollars to do for people. And we know that the majority of people who are struggling, we looked at the data, we saw homeless has to do a lot of times with family traumas, things like that. But also, it has to do with the home. We know that majority of homes that are fatherless, that are single mother homes, the kids do not do as well in society as kids who have both their parents. So, and the same thing with, you said education, that starts at home. We should be guiding our children to not make the same mistakes that we made, going to get a degree that has nothing to do with the job force and then complain that we can't afford a lifestyle, right? We should be guiding them towards the right trades, the right education. We should be educating them in the home. It starts with the people. I don't want the government in my home doing that job for me. We got this. We got this. So
45%. But then at the same time, taxes are not being used effectively.
Right.
How much of that are we going through right now?
Well, I mean, on the inverse, and what do you think will solve the problem of the extreme poverty and wealth inequality in the country.
Well,
Now, hey, there's a $1 billion question there now. In a normal conversation, when you're just, talking as a regular person to another regular person, like, you're 9 times out of 10 going to try to answer that question directly. Either you're going to give some sort of ideas or some, crazy, idea, whatever. It may work, it may not work. You may sound crazy, or you're just going to say, I don't know. Hey, I don't know. You tell me what your idea is. But Pat or Davis, whatever his name is, like, he doesn't care about those type of issues. Why? Because that's not beneficial for him or his brand or his company or his money. He doesn't care about the homeless problem.
Bro is just making accusations, statements, generalizing, no data, no nothing to back it up. He's just generalizing and shit.
Ship him off to another island or something. I don't know. Put them in jail. Let Donald Trump deport them. Something. I don't know. But get them off my street. That's his only solution. So he's not.
He said that?
He's not going to answer this question. And
he said that, bro?
That's the annoying part. But let's see how.
I got a feeling, I gave you the benefit of the doubt, but statements like that, I got a feeling all your content is shitty like this, bro.
Andrew listens to all this garbage and then brings it right back to him.
Well, let's see. California's been trying to do it.
Well, the thing is, they tried. That's the thing is, everyone sees Gavin Newsom as like an enabler for all these destructive democratic policies, but he still makes concessions to conservatives who are like bullying him into not carrying it out. For example, let's take the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which is still the biggest open air drug zone in the city. Been that way for decades. He, obviously during the Biden administration and when Newsom was in control, he still is. It was a crazy scene out there. There was people smoking fentanyl on the streets, people defecating and sleeping in the streets.
It's San Francisco.
Yeah, in this particular area.
Is there a clip you want him to show?
No, I think we just overlay it or something. But I mean, in general, Governor Newsom was being kind of like shit on for letting that happen. But the reality is, and people on the ground know this, there was supposed to be a safe injection site that was 2 blocks long, 2 blocks wide, that was supposed to be maintained by the state and the city. So it made it so people wouldn't be able to use heroin, fentanyl, and meth on the streets. They would have to go to a controlled environment where the public and children and people who were living in that community.
Is this stuff illegal? Are these drugs illegal? Do you guys think it should be legal? If you don't think it should be legal and it's illegal, should they have a safe space where they can do illegal activities? Or should we use the legal system? Just curious, should we use the legal system? And I'm not saying put them in jail and shit like that, but I'm saying the same way that we have people who break the law and aren't necessarily, that need more mental help, more support, programs that'll support them and help them, more of that, right? But an injection site, and I can speak on this because my family was destroyed by drugs, by pills, by fentanyl, all that stuff. In the last year, I lost an aunt and 2 cousins from drug overdose in the last year. So this topic is important to me. Of course, Gavin Newsom was scared to do that. Of course, he was going to get a bunch of pushback for creating injection sites. Of course, he would. The stuff is illegal. It should be dealt with like it's illegal, so less people would want to do it out in the street, out all in the open, where my kids can see it, where we feel unsafe, and they should be getting help. In a safe space that's not outside in the public. That's how we manage most illegal things that aren't violent crimes. And even some illegal things that are violent crimes, they still go to mental institutions. They don't go to jail. But we have all these programs to help people who are addicted to drugs. And you can't help these people if they don't want help. But you also don't don't promote it to continue to inject and do these drugs that are killing them. You also don't promote it. And at the end of the day, I could be wrong, but I genuinely believe it's not up to Andrew's opinion or this guy's opinion. It's up to what the people vote for. And the people have voted for policies that aren't woke. That's the reality of it. And if in San Francisco the people vote for it, then do it. But you know you're going to get scrutiny, and you know it's going to affect your position next election. Probably. Because if you don't feel it's going to be successful, then you're probably not going to want to die on that hill. And that's what Gavin Newsom said. He didn't think it was going to, ultimately, it wasn't that he was scared of pushback. Ultimately, if he did get because he does a bunch of shit he knows he's going to get pushback on, but I think ultimately he didn't have the conviction that that program would work. Thank God.
He wouldn't have to interact with them, and they could have the access to the services they need. At the last minute, Governor Newsom didn't build it because he was too scared of getting another media smear campaign and being made to seem like someone who.
But those programs already exist. What do you need an injection site for?
Lets people do drugs in the open, but he still.
So, in other words, he was a coward. Which you can say
That's
whatever you want about whatever idea.
I can't react to this guy no more. It's just we're just not gonna agree. I know there's a huge crowd that does agree with him, as you can see here. People love this guy. They love his synopsis, and it is what it is. Thank God the majority of people don't agree with this guy because they didn't vote accordingly. And I hope it stays that way because I've lost brain cells listening to this guy. So let's continue on to what's going on in the world. I need to catch up to some stuff. How's everybody doing, man, now that we off this topic? Let's take a look real quick because let me look at the news real quick and get an idea of what's going on in the economy. And China has blinked. Now, hold on. I got to look at some stuff here. Oh, Carney and Trump met. Let's watch this. I want to see how the market reacted to it.
For your leadership. You're a transformational president, focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker, securing your borders, ending the
Let's see if he has that same energy that he had when he got elected.
scourge of fentanyl and other opioids, and
for news AP, I got put
and
onto AP,
I've been
so I
elected,
checked
with,
AP News
with my colleagues here,
and YouTube,
with the help of my colleagues here,
and
I'm
X.
gonna spread the credit to transform Canada with a similar focus on the economy, securing our borders, again on fentanyl, much greater focus on defense and security, securing the Arctic and developing the Arctic. And the history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together. And I look forward to, addressing some of those issues that we have, but also finding those areas of mutual cooperation so we can move forward.
That's great. Very nice. Thank you very much. It's a very nice statement. I have a lot of respect for this man, and I watched him come up, in a sense, through the ranks when he wasn't given much of a chance, and he ran a really great campaign. He did a really great debate. I think the debate was very helpful. I was going to raise my hand. I don't know if that's good or bad. I shouldn't say that. That might hurt you. But no, he ran a really great election, I thought. And yeah, something could happen. Something could happen. Yeah, please.
What's the top concession you want out of Canada? The top concession you want out of Canada?
Concession?
Yes.
Friendship.
But that's not a concession.
No, we're going to be friends with Canada. Regardless of anything, we're going to be friends with Canada. Canada is a very special place to me. I know so many people that live in Canada. My parents had relatives that lived in Canada, my mother in particular. And no, I love Canada. I have a lot of respect for the Canadians. Wayne Gretzky, how good, the great one. You happen to have a very, very good hockey player right here on the Capitals, who I have a lot of respect. He is a big, tough cookie, too. He just broke the record, and he's a great guy. And, we had the team here, and I got to know a lot of the players. But now Canada is a very special place. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, I'd like to get your response to this too. Mr. President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state.
Yeah. No. Well, I still believe that, but you know, it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, you know, as a real estate developer, you know, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person.
Bro.
But when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, you know, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think
he's
that,
so antsy to respond.
There are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada.
Thank you. That's one of the things that Canadians do not give. Like, it's disrespectful sometimes how they be treating America with their tariffs and their policies, not allowing us to have banks over there, that type of thing. But like, the reason why you guys have a lot of the social programs that you have that we don't have in the United States is because you don't spend the type of budget we spend on our military, and you benefit 100% from it. And that's a lot of countries in Europe, in the UK, all over the Western Hemisphere. And people don't show America enough love for that reason. There's a lot of peace in this world because of that. Because I ain't gonna lie, bro. Trust me, Russia would be snapping on Eastern European countries for sure. And China would have been took Taiwan and some of these other countries in Asia. So these people should be thanking America for our military and should be wanting to create more fair trade.
If you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. We have done that in the past.
Trump is
and part of that, as the president
whatever
just
you say,
said,
bro,
is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the president has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
Let's go. That's great. Guys, I said this from the beginning. That's all Trump truly wants. People think that Trump just wants nationalism. I think he's America first, but you could be America first and still want the global economy to thrive. And I do think he was using a lot of this stuff to negotiate this stuff. Like, why did it take all this for Canada to pay their fair share into NATO? For Europe to pay their fair share into NATO? For the UK, none of them are meeting their fair share of NATO, and we're overspending. Meanwhile, we got a deficit. We're getting into more and more debt every year. And like the last YouTuber that I was reacting to that didn't know what he was talking about, you know, he wants all of these social programs. He wants to spend even more than 1.3 trillion on social programs. Perfect. Let's make a more efficient government that's less bloated and spending on frivolous shit. And then let's get some of these countries to pay their fair share into some of these agreements that we agreed on. And then we can start tackling our deficit and paying more attention to our people. That's all it is. Like, people can paint it out to be racist and nationalism and all this shit, but at the end of the day, this is what we wanted. We wanted Canada to pour more into NATO and be less dependent on us.
They have way, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military.
And that's what the people voted for. Because if it wasn't, why is Trump in office? By a landslide.
Because Mark knew, they were low, and now they're stepping it up, and that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
I love. It looks like they got a good relationship. It looks like they got a good relationship. All of the media, the headlines, the scare, the fear mongering. Because it looked like they hated each other, and now look at them. They look like they homeboys.
Never say never.
What would it take to get the tariffs off of Canada?
Well, we'll be talking about different things. Look, we want to protect our automobile business, and so does Mark. But we want to make the automobiles, and we want to, we have a tremendous abundance of energy, more than any country. We have, just in Alaska alone, ANWR has been reopened now. ANWR is probably the largest find anywhere in the world. They say it's larger than Saudi Arabia. I don't know, but it's a lot. But we have tremendous amounts of energy. Other countries don't. We're both lucky in that way. They have energy. We have energy. We have more than we can ever use and more than we could ever sell, actually. And you have the same thing. So we're two countries that are very lucky. If you look at China, they don't have that. It's a big disadvantage. Other countries, most countries don't have. Most countries don't have that. So Canada and us, we have a lot of advantages over other places.
When you consider what Mr. Carney just said, that Canada is not for sale, does this make the discussion a little more difficult to start on?
No, not at all. No, not at all. No, time will tell. It's only time. But I say, never say never. I've had many things.
I thought I muted. My bad, guys. My bad. I thought I muted my. I went to.
They ended up being doable, and only doable in a very friendly way. But if it's to everybody's benefit, Canada loves us, and we love Canada. That's, I think, the number one thing that's important. But we'll see. I mean, over time, we'll see what happens.
Is the U.S. prepared to walk away from that pact?
From what pact?
USMCA.
No. It's fine. It's there. It's good. We use it for certain things. It's there. We have the USMCA is a good deal for everybody. I won't say this about Mark, but I didn't like his predecessor. I didn't like a person that worked for. She was terrible, actually. She was a terrible person. And she really hurt that deal very badly because she tried to take advantage of the deal and she didn't get away with it. You know who I'm talking about. But so we had a bad relationship having to do with the fact that we disagreed with the way they viewed the deal, and we ended it. We ended that relationship pretty much. The USMCA is great for all countries. It's good for all countries. We do have a negotiation coming up over the next year or so.
Why should Tuesday's major millions
now the U.S. national debt is creeping ever so closer to $37 trillion.
What am I doing?
That's interest payments alone on the debt, one of the biggest line items in the federal budget. Some economists are warning this could create a fiscal crisis.
Right, this is a rookie live stream. Rookie live streaming. One of these days, I'm going to have somebody, you know how like Joe Rogan got somebody? PBD got somebody. One of these days, bro. One of these days. So I don't mess up like this during the lives because this is embarrassing, bro. All right. That's interesting. I think this is great for the stock market. So let's see how the market's doing. Let's go Yahoo Finance. Actually, we'll just go to Fidelity. You know what? No, let's go to Yahoo Finance. Wait, we got some news here.
Well, now the U.S. national debt is creeping ever so closer to $37 trillion. Interest payments alone on the debt, one of the biggest line items in the federal budget. Some economists are warning this could create a fiscal crisis. Joining me right now is a woman who knows better than anybody, Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget President, Maya McGinnis.
So they're not
is here.
talking about
Maya,
Canada
great to
talks.
see you.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to get right to the elephant in the room, and that is Congress is working on this reconciliation package. They want to extend President Trump's tax cuts, and you say?
Well,
Please.
We're going to have to offset that with some spending cuts. So there's a whole lot of conversation about tax cuts. And those in many ways need to happen in the fact that if you were to let these expire, it would be a huge tax increase and have a negative effect in the immediate run. However, fiscally, it would help. And so instead of just cutting taxes, we have to cut spending. And Maria, nobody is talking about that. Right? So we're talking about bills that no matter what, and there's two different approaches, one in the House, one in the Senate. The House is far superior, I have to say. But both of them are talking about cutting a range of only a couple $1 trillion in the House and only $4 billion in the Senate. This is out of a total of $86 trillion in spending over the same time period. So for a party that's been talking about cutting spending a lot, yes, I understand we're going to cut taxes. That will help with growth. That will help keep tax rates where they are. But if we don't cut spending, this will balloon the national debt. And the debt is a big topic here. People in the markets are definitely aware of this problem.
Absolutely. Well, look, to be fair, most Republicans that I've spoken with always say the same thing, and that is we have a spending problem. We don't have, another problem. It's a spending problem. Now, you've got an op-ed. You talk about this in your op-ed. You say the financial situation is, quote, dire. And I want to get your take on where the cuts could come from, because you're right. This weekend on Sunday Morning Futures, I had on John Barrasso, leadership in the Senate, and I said to him, how is it possible that the Senate has only identified $4 billion in cuts when the House is at $1.5 trillion? And he said he's going to come up with at least $2 trillion in cuts. Where specifically should Congress be cutting?
Well, good. First off, let's hold them to that $2 trillion, because even then we're going to be borrowing another $3, $4, $5 trillion, given all of the tax cuts. But and like you said, the problem is spending. If you look forward, the growth in the budget comes from spending, not revenues that are lower than they traditionally have been as a share of the economy, but spending. But you have to have the willpower to cut the spending. So the problem is they're taking everything off the table. So one thing is that in reconciliation, the biggest program and the biggest challenge, quite frankly, Social Security cannot be included. We can go back and talk about Social Security, but that program, despite what every politician is telling us, is headed towards insolvency. And if we don't make changes to strengthen it, there will be across-the-board automatic spending cuts, which is a terrible, terrible thing that's even in the future. There are things that they can be looking at. They should be looking at Medicare, and they should and are be looking at Medicaid, because our health care delivery system has tons of areas where there are huge problems. We've expanded the budget in health care massively in recent times, and we have not brought that back to different levels. There are a lot of savings there that will not affect recipients. But I'm also worried about the conversation of, we shouldn't affect everybody. We've borrowed trillions too much every single year. We're going to have to make some real choices. Yeah. But another area in the budget they're not looking at all, $20 trillion plus in tax expenditures over the budget window. And that is, quite frankly, spending through the tax code. So we act like it's tax cuts, but it's things that really increase in inefficiencies, equities, de-level the playing field. We want to broaden that tax base so we can keep rates low, and then look at all the areas of the budget, the discretionary portion, welfare programs, Medicaid, which they're looking at, but there's spectrum, there's repealing parts of the IRA, the ACA, a lot of things that have expanded in the past couple of years that we could scale back, and we could certainly get that $2 trillion, and frankly, we should be shooting for more.
Well, I'm with you on the Inflation Reduction Act. There's so much fat in that IRA, for sure. But herein lies the debate within the Republican Congress, the House and the Senate, and they can only afford 3 votes, no votes, in order to pass President Trump's agenda. Many people are saying this is our once-in-a-generation opportunity to actually seriously put a dent in spending. You just mentioned Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. DOJ came up with these ideas and said, look, there's waste, fraud, and abuse, but that's a drop in the bucket, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, I'm a fan of DOJ. I think we should be DOJing everything and look through the line item of everything, getting into the details. Really impressive. But it also became the bright, shiny object that took the oxygen away from where the real structural savings are. So we've got to get rid of waste and frost. We have to improve efficiencies. I think DOJ can restructure some of our agencies in ways that would work better, but that is not going to save the trillions that we need to save. We have to look at our mandatory spending. We have to do defense spending smarter. We're going to need more revenues in defense. The truth is, as the world gets riskier, but we have to look at our procurement process and other areas, and we have to look at every one of our major programs, many of which just have not been discussed for specific spending cuts in years, and people are used to pretending we don't have to make any choices. Well, that's what budgets are, though. They're
once
choices.
You give somebody something, they don't want to give it back.
You have a
and that's an issue.
for it.
And by the way, what elected official do you know that's actually going to come out and say, yeah, I'm running for re-election in November, but by the way, I'm cutting your Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security while I do it?
But everybody talks about cutting spending in the talking points. Nobody's willing to fill in the details. And now that we have to talk about details, that's where it's getting more difficult. Credit to those fiscal conservatives, particularly in the House, who are actually pushing to do more spending cuts. The real divide is between those folks who say, I'm not going to touch Medicaid. We need to touch Medicaid. There are savings to be had there, more so even with Medicare. Credit for the ones who are actually willing to have the conviction, the courage of their conviction, and talk about enacting some of those cuts now that they have the opportunity.
When you say we are going to have to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, what are you saying? Are you saying you want to cut those programs back to give people less?
First off, let me just say, I don't want to do those. I wish we hadn't been borrowing for 3 decades.
Yeah.
Right. So now what we're going to have to do is a little bit of everything. There are ways to start by improving the efficiencies of every one of those programs.
Yeah, good.
And then you have so much built-in growth. What we just need to do is grow the programs more slowly.
I know you're talking about this. Go ahead, finish.
No, I was just going to say that it doesn't mean we'll actually be spending less. We're going to be spending more each year than the year before. Even under the budgets they're talking about, reconciliation, we'll be spending many more trillions over the budget window, not less. We're not cutting, but we do need to bring the growth rate down from where it is.
See, the last time Congress was at this in President Trump's first term, they did the tax cuts in December. But now they've got the debt ceiling, and President Trump wants that raised by $5 trillion.
Yeah.
So they've got this X date. They've got to do it sooner. Now, let me ask you about the president's budget, because he's proposing $163 billion in cuts from the federal budget. He's targeting federal programs like climate initiatives, public broadcasting, foreign aid. Your assessment?
Well, it's interesting. So on the micro level, there are very large cuts in certain areas, like you just mentioned. On the macro level, that $163 billion that would be reduced in the discretionary budget, they're actually adding back in the reconciliation bill. So again, not really all the spending cuts we're talking about. So in specific areas, there would be very large cuts, much larger than we've generally seen. But at the top macro level, we're actually talking about budget that would be flat. All of it would be added back in, but much of it would be taken away from domestic discretionary and moved into the areas of defense and homeland security.
What specifically, go back to the cuts here for a second on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid that you want to say. What specifically, what number and how much do you think they could cut without really cutting into the muscle of what people are expecting, our seniors?
Yeah, let me first say where I think the target should be, because I think Secretary Bessent has laid out the exact rate target.
Well, he knows
the correct target. He knows this issue. He cares about this
yeah.
issue. And he said we need to get our budget deficits down from where they are above 6% of GDP to 3% of GDP. Let's go. Let's make that our target. That is a very aggressive number. But keep in mind, we used to talk about balancing the budget. This is only half that, right? So this is getting it to a sustained deficit, whereas we used to be shooting for zero. That would take about $7.5 trillion in savings over a budget window, and that is about 5 times as much as the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is the previous and only debt reduction deal that we've had in over a decade. So it's very significant. It is doable, but it's certainly aggressive enough.
All right, I've had enough. I think that pretty much a lot of the stuff that I'm concerned about, a lot of it is priced in. I don't think the markets are going to crash if, for example, unemployment comes back up, GDP shrinks a bit more. I hope not, but I don't think it's going to crash. I think a lot of people are expecting this just because of the supply chain issues. So I'm willing to bet on Palantir right now. So I'm coming over to the options chain here, and I'm going to sell puts on Palantir. And I missed out on a little bit. It was at $107, but I was watching this video. But I still believe in this. So I'm going to head over to the options chains. It's at $108. I want to be at a 0.20 delta, which is 94, which is crazy because I could have done better than this at 93, but that's okay. That's all right. I messed up and I waited too long. So with that being said, let me pull up my calculator, and we're gonna do the math here. This is if we do 100 divided by 94, that's the strike price, times what is it? $2.86 times $2.86. We're looking at a 3% return. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to sell to open. I'm going to sell this put of Palantir. Let me see. I'm going to do market, and it's a put. Quantity, let me see how much what the estimated is for one. You see, I don't like this because I'm going to do it on my phone, because it doesn't give me my estimates and stuff that I want. So let me refresh, because the numbers have changed. Penny, please. I'm working here, girl. All right, so we're back to the 94. The numbers are worse. Stop pushing my mouse. So let's go with 2 contracts. We're gonna do market. That's $554. And here it is, guys. We're going to place the order. And we got it, baby. We got it. All right, so I just sold a put. It expires in 30 days for Palantir. I collected $550 in premium. That's a 3% return for this month. And I'm just trying to make 2 to 3% every month. As I get better at this stuff, I'll try to aim for more, but I think that's pretty good. And so, I've been following this shit every day. So I have conviction in that in the next 30 days, I think that Palantir will not drop under $94. It's currently at 107 and some change, $108. Today alone, it's dropped 13%. Today alone, it's dropped 13%. So when it's red, I love especially a 13% drop. I love selling puts on that. So, because if I can buy it at $94, I'm happy to, and I'll just sell covered calls on it. So, long term, I think it's a win-win no matter what. And when you do a 0.2 delta, you got an 80% chance of you not being called to buy it. So, if you know anything about stock options, then that's what's up. If you don't, you should learn, man. You should learn about stock options. You should learn about stocks. But more importantly, you should focus, if you don't feel like you're making enough money, you need to lock in on the main thing. Whatever it is your main thing is, lock the hell in so that you have the margin to not just learn the stock market, but do something about it, because you're going to learn the most when you're actually in the market. Okay. And I'm not talking about day trading. I'm talking about long-term investing. Now, with that being said, yesterday we were learning a lot about stocks, and we left off with pretty much what is the stock market. And now I'm pissed off because I exited a lot of tabs that I shouldn't have exited. Damn. Oh. Wait, I think I got him back. Hold on, y'all. All right, perfect. So I got the tabs back that we were working with before. But before we go into learning more about stocks, just piggybacking off of the conversation that we had earlier today, and look at the extreme fear index. By the way, let me refresh this and make sure this is fresh. Whoops, wrong one. Look at the chart. So it's going back up to fear. Now it's starting to drop a bit. Okay. Interesting. All right, but earlier today we were talking, the gentleman that we were reacting to, he had strong opinions that were mostly anecdotal, that were mostly him generalizing, him speculating, and making judgment on people with no real data. But he claimed the math didn't math, right? But I ran into this video because he definitely has this thing against CEOs and billionaires and entrepreneurs and business owners. They are like evil, right? And I saw this title on a video that says, "Are CEOs overpaid? CEO versus blue collar worker." So I guess they're going to sit down and debate. That's interesting. Let's check it out.
CEOs, blue collar workers. Both are essential to society, yet CEOs earn 200 times more. Is this pay gap fair or the result of a broken system? We paired them face to face to find out.
What were some of the biggest obstacles to get you to where you are today?
Founding a tech company is incredibly stressful. Just a whole bunch of risk taking. I'm married, got 5 children, going away from what I was doing and making significantly less money is probably the biggest obstacle to getting where I am today.
I like to joke that I'm first generation blue collar. And I chose something very different than a lot of my family. They were like, "Are you sure about that? Is that really the move you want to make?" And I went into it, and now that I'm established, they definitely are much more supportive, and I think it's great.
Being an entrepreneur, probably the only one in your family, people not really understanding, what it takes, the sacrifices you have to make. You start with an idea. You didn't necessarily say, "I'm about to, create this." Sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you don't have mentors most of the time. So you just kind of have to figure it out.
I can't tell you how many Christmases I've been laying under an engine at the airport when my poor little kids are waiting for dad to get home, so that's very difficult too.
A lot of sacrifices.
A lot of sacrifices.
The stresses of running a business are tough sometimes. There was one year that we didn't get paid on a really big job, and I made sure all my employees got paid, and at the end of the day, I went on food stamps that year. I want to provide the best for my family. I truly care for my employees, and
as soon as you make money, everybody want to tell you
what
to
do
do
for their families. It's a big weight to carry.
I'm from Chile. You have to escape pretty much from our country.
How long ago was that?
A year ago.
Wow.
I was open to do anything because of my wife, my kids. And then I had this opportunity to work in this company, and it's not that easy as most of the people would think. It's hard, but some way I feel blessed.
CEOs of S&P 500 companies now make an average of $16.3 million, about 200 times more than their median employees. Why should CEOs make millions while some workers can't even afford rent?
That's a pretty interesting question, I would say. So there is a big gap, but at the same time, there's normally one CEO at a company. That particular person is the one who has the responsibility to grow the company. Because if they can't, the likelihood of them going to another place to get another position is slim. Because if they can't do their job, there will be no jobs for anybody else.
I fully support every CEO being paid what the board.
It's like the head coach of the Lakers. You know what I mean? It's like the head coach of the Lakers. And people will be like, yeah, but the players make crazy amount of monies. What about the people, security? What about the people who put the floor out for the basketball courts, who do the commentating, who mop the floors, who do the ticketing, the sales people, the marketing people, the corporate people, the HR department? There's a lot more employees in those. There's thousands of employees in those things, right? CEOs are hard to come by. The skill sets, the wisdom, the training, the experience that you have to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, they're not easy to replace. They demand that through supply and demand. And if they generate the income, then it is what it is, right? I think the smartest CEOs pay their employees great. You got companies like Costco that pay their employees great. You got people who, there was a CEO recently, the CEO of Spandex, I think it was, the founder of Spandex, and she was the CEO. She sold the company, and everyone got like $100,000 check when she sold it. Every employee from the bottom to the top. So, like everybody treats their business and what they did, to get there differently, but there's deeper stories. And a lot of times CEOs don't make any money or founders don't make any money for a decade until they finally sold or the company's finally profitable. And you got to divide their salaries based on 50 years of experience. No difference to me, a barber who charges, $100 for a haircut versus one that charges $20. You're not paying for the haircut. You're paying for the experience, the knowledge, the skills the consistency that barber developed over the course of their career to give you the service that they give you today. That's what you're paying for. It's not for their time.
So they should be paid, similar to the whole Elon Musk windfall bonus situation in Delaware, where he was due billions of dollars and then a judge shut it down saying that he shouldn't earn that much. The shareholders said he should. The board said he should because he drove way more than that in value to the company.
I've worked for 5 CEOs. I gotta be a little careful about what I say about the current one, but he literally makes $100,000 per day. That's craziness. There's a difference between an entrepreneur that has built something from scratch. They deserve every single thing they can get. A CEO that was hired by a board and they're all taking part in the profits of the company and all that.
How did they get there?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's, $100,000 a day is necessary.
Not necessary.
$16.3 million is excessive.
It's not necessary, but what's amazing about our economy these days is that just because a CEO makes $12 million doesn't mean that you made less money because they took more. That's not how our monetary system works anymore. And so you can make more, and you should want to make more, and we should be facilitating, infrastructures and a platform as founders, as CEOs, where people can have no ceilings and work their way up. Don't get me wrong. And that doesn't happen across the board. But I do think if we actually spent more time finding the CEOs that are doing this right and praising them, as opposed to villainizing every CEO because of what some headlines show, we looked at the data, and the data shows that most founders, most CEOs are doing the right thing, because if they weren't, we wouldn't have this amazing country that we're in. And based on the data, it's a lot better than most countries, regardless of how people, and people, I don't think people mean wrong. I just think that, we have our biases, we have our perspective, but when it comes down to things, when we really look at things from a broader view, we see more. And looking at the data, it just doesn't showcase that most CEOs are greedy pieces of shit. It just doesn't show that in the data.
For at least most of those CEOs, if not all of them, if I had to guess, I'd say there's plenty of employees underneath any of those CEOs who actually deal with even more stress than they do on the job, who maybe put more on the line to just get to the position they're at than even a CEO.
That's rough.
A company can run for some time without a CEO,
sometimes,
and you can't say the same about their workforce, obviously, depending on the industry and what.
You see, he said that a company can survive without a CEO. You can't say the same without a workforce. It's actually both. It's actually both. Look what's happening with UPS. If the C-suite, if the executives don't fight back a little bit because they see the numbers, they're paying attention to supply chains, to the whole entire picture, they are steering the ship. Sure, when you're on a ship, do you need people to be manning the ship, to be maintaining the ship and all that stuff? Of course. But to say that the captain of that ship isn't just as important as everybody else is insane. Will the ship continue to move without a captain? Yes. Will it crash into an iceberg without a captain? Yes.
What kind of work they do.
I don't agree. If you look at somebody like Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, let's just say he makes the average $16 million. Has he provided more than $16 million worth of value? I would say yes. I would say he would be very, very hard to replace. Could he be replaced?
Change the world.
Absolutely. If he's a crappy CEO.
Change the world. Elon Musk, change the world. Jeff Bezos, change the world. Absolutely, way more value. Way more value than any NBA player, any rapper. Way more value.
CEO, then he shouldn't be paid that, 100%.
My argument is that a CEO might put out significantly more than what they earn, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's been earned. That's my argument.
I agree. It doesn't I think there's a lot of CEOs that haven't earned it, but I think the majority of CEOs, if they didn't earn it, it would show up on a financial statement. If they didn't earn it, it would show up right here. It would show up right here if they didn't earn it. This CEO, you're going to tell me the CEO of NVIDIA didn't earn all his wealth? Look at what he created here. When no one believed in them, when they were here, okay? Speaking of which, look at the valuation. I need to go sell some puts on NVIDIA as well. It's crazy. Or buy some call options. Maybe not. It's scary times. But anyways, when they were here, you know, to where they're at now, that man deserves every penny he's making, bro. Literally changing the world, making everybody's quality of life better. You can tell me Amazon didn't make everyone's quality of life better? Netflix didn't make everyone's quality of life better? Do we need it? No. Is it the bare necessities? No. But the consumer has voted through their own dollars, and they are saying, absolutely, he deserves that money.
What do you say to workers who think you sit in an office all day while they do all the work?
I've gotten that before, actually. And usually I say, well, somebody's got to make sure you have work, A, and B, somebody's got to make sure your paychecks are there on time, and somebody's got to make sure that the jobs are profitable. And without my employees, I wouldn't have a business. You know, without me doing what I do, they wouldn't have a job.
Sometimes if you don't.
And it's not true that he wouldn't have a business without his employees. He just wouldn't have as big as a business. He would have he'd be self-employed. He'd have a smaller business. And that's cool and all, but is that what people want? Do people want CEOs and founders to just look out for themselves? To not grow their business? I don't think that's what people want either, right?
You don't see a person.
We'd be in a way worse situation. Forget low-paying jobs. We wouldn't have jobs.
Doing manual labor,
and the data tells us
consider that person not doing as much. When in fact, you know, to scale a company or to innovate, to create, it takes a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of thoughts.
I work incredibly hard, typically 10, 12, 14 hours a day, sometimes through the weekend, in order to make sure that the company succeeds. I have a board of directors, and it's their job to fire me if I am not performing according to the expectations of the shareholders. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of the frontline workers don't see. Fundraising, recruiting is probably a fourth of my job. Strategy and alignment. So many things that, you know, that you might not see up on the scoreboard for sales or marketing, but are incredibly important to the running of the business as well.
I don't take it to heart because
and look, you know, the data, you know, the argument right now is, you know, who has more stress in work? They would argue that a regular employee is, you know, a lot of times more stressed at work than a CEO who sits in his office. But the data doesn't say that. Entrepreneurs, CEOs, high-level executives are 2 times more likely to suffer from depression and suicide. So think about that. So the data doesn't back up that claim. You're at a higher risk of mental health struggles.
I feel like, you know, we're human.
And I'm not saying that's why they deserve more money. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that the claim that CEOs are just sitting pretty, having a great time, all this stuff, they're not stressed out, they're in the office chilling. That's just not the case. It's very high level stressful work, especially when you're building something.
Human, yeah. Right?
And trust me, most people who think they want small businesses and become entrepreneurs, most people fail at it because they don't love it. They don't want to do it. They hate it and they go back to a job. Isn't that the case? Doesn't the data back that up as well?
no one ever understands what a person go through unless they're in it.
Do you think blue-collar workers work harder than CEOs?
There are some extremely hardworking CEOs, and I absolutely respect that, but for every one CEO, there's probably at least 100 employees who are, without a doubt, harder workers.
See, he said without a doubt harder workers. And the math doesn't math there either, right? I'm not saying employees don't work their ass off. I've been an employee. I work my ass off as an employee. But there's more responsibilities and there's arguably more work to be done as a CEO. Sometimes the CEO and the founder has to be the janitor. Sometimes they got to pick, pack, and ship. And sometimes they got to be the CFO. Sometimes they got to be the accountant. Sometimes they got to be the head of the sales team. They got to wear every single hat to fix problems and challenges in a company, on top of listening to the 100 employees who are together having Indian huddles, debating on what the CEO should be doing. But the CEO a lot of times is in isolation. They don't have people to talk to. They got to go to a therapist. You know what I mean? So, you know, I just wish that everyone would appreciate each other's roles. And I do think that there's many companies and many businesses that do it the right way and everybody appreciates each other and everybody wins. But there are a lot of situations where the work environment isn't fair. And that's why people want unions. And that's why people, you know, that's why HR exists and all these things. And so it's very complex. I don't think it's a perfect system whatsoever, but I do think that we don't give it enough credit.
Blue collar workers in general work harder than CEOs.
If you were talking physically, yeah, maybe, you know, it depends.
Oh,
you
without
never
a
see
doubt.
my CEO.
Most of the time, without a doubt, blue collar workers are working their asses off, but it just depends on the type of CEO they are. Some CEOs like to be hands-on and they delegate all of the office stuff, right? Don't you guys agree with that? And there's some CEOs that, you know, they're most, like for me, you know, where I'm more useful is in the marketing area in my companies. It's not in the finance department. It's not in the warehousing or the sales team. It's marketing and advertising for me. And so I delegate the rest of it. But there's some CEOs that are way better being on the field. And like my brother, he owns a construction company. That man is on the field. He doesn't like doing any of the office work. He delegates all of it. He's on the field. It just depends on the CEO, man.
CEO out laying under an engine with hydraulics dripping in his eyeballs and busted knuckles and, you know, all that. But you know, when he's at home with his family, he's thinking about the airline. And
can't turn it off.
That. When I come home, I do what I want to do, and I don't think about that place at all.
I love his honesty. You know, like, I have 2 phones, guys. Let me show you. I have 2 phones. 2 phones. This is my work phone. This is where everybody knows my number, my information, all that. This is my phone where nobody knows the number. Only very, very important people. Not that everybody's not important, but people that need to get a hold of me in case of an emergency, they have access to this. And I will leave this at home when I go on vacation, because if I don't, I can't turn it off. Literally can't sleep at night because of that stuff. And I know that happens to employees as well, but you know, I love that transparency that the blue collar workers, like, I get to turn it off when I get home. You know, I do miss that.
Oh, wow. I get all the hard reads. You see this? Okay. After receiving a $96 million pay package, including a $5 million sign-on bonus, Starbucks' new CEO laid off over 1,000 employees just a month later. That
is whack to me. That is 100% whack to me. You know, you're supposed to be the last to eat. And I know that a lot of, you know, that compensation was already earned, probably from previous year's performance. And so he was owed that based on how they did previously. But if you know you're running into turmoil in the company and you're going to have to let people go, that's different. And I do think, you know, a CEO should be making sure those jobs are in place. And if you got to take half of what you earned to make sure those jobs are still around, You probably should, because it's better for the culture of your company. You don't want these headlines to come out. It's better long term. But CEOs, when they're not the owners of the companies, when they're not the founders, and this is why when I invest in stocks, I care about the CEO, who it is. Most of the time, the founder is the best because they're emotionally attached and they care about more than just, especially when you're growing a company, they want that company to be successful and they want their employees and the culture to be amazing. And so I think that's good. But at the same time, we don't know why these 1,100 employees were let go. What was the stuff that was happening? The stuff that was happening, for example, in during all of these protests, especially in Washington and in Oregon, people were shutting down stores left and right, not because of financial turmoil, because the company was struggling, but because of political issues and safety and concerns. There's been a lot of that. And I'm not saying that's what happened here, but at the same time, we have to do our due diligence. So let's do that. Why did Starbucks let go of 1,100 employees when the CEO took a huge bonus? And let's see what happens here.
Prioritize profit over keeping people employed.
If you don't have the profit, no one will be employed. And the bigger the business is, the smallest thing can actually be huge. It may be, this coffee, we have to add an extra 50 cents. The extra 50 cents can go a long way in a company that large.
If this guy's making 96 million, was that 96?
So look, it wasn't about, so they say it wasn't about money. It was about enhancing efficiency, accountability, and reducing organizational complexity. The CEO emphasized the need to streamline decision-making process and improve execution better to support store operations. We're not effective in making decisions and then holding each other accountable to those decisions, highlighting the necessity for these changes. The restructuring also including closing several hundred open or vacant positions, simplifying the menu by removing 13 underperforming drinks, and implementing a return to office policy requiring vice presidents and above to work from the Seattle or Toronto offices 3 days a week. The package was designed to attract, see. While Starbucks leadership framed the layoffs as necessary for operational efficiency and a return to the company's core values, the timing alongside the substantial executive compensation package raised a lot of questions. So here's my take on it. I think a lot of companies will make decisions like this because let's say they have a lot of bloat, just like our government does, right? You have to reform things in order to make a company more efficient that's stable or declining in performance, so that once it's stable and you reformed it and it's more efficiency, it'll start to grow. And when it starts to grow, you start hiring again. And long term, your employment should grow, right? Here's the thing though. Sometimes, and a lot of times I should say, CEOs, it's all about the numbers to them. A lot of times. And so could we accomplish this without axing 1,100 people? Probably. Is it going to take a little bit longer? Sort of like this? Probably. But is it better for culture? Is it better for the brand? You don't want these headlines, bro. But let's see. We can look at Starbucks right now and see if employment has actually grown. Because if those 1,100 jobs that were cut were because those jobs just weren't going to exist anymore, did they create a way for these people to rehire? Because sometimes they cut certain departments and they're like, yo, just reapply and you're guaranteed an expedited reemployment or something like that. So let me see if I can find something like that. And then sometimes they give a severance package, stuff like that. So did they take care of them on the way out? So it says Starbucks did not implement a formal rehiring program for the 1,100 corporate employees laid off in early 2025. But they continue to receive pay, healthcare benefits, and bonuses for months after they were let go. Employees were offered a severance package based on their tenure with the company, and Starbucks provided a career transition service to support employees in finding new job opportunities. I'm not 100% mad at the CEO, man. I don't know that this you can put this all on greed. And then let's look at Starbucks financials. So down here we can see, they've been cutting employment. So we can see here, they were hiring a bunch. This was at its peak. And then obviously it started coming down. In 2024, they've cut quite a bit. But were they cutting because of revenue issues? Doesn't look like it. Did they have profit issues? Not really. Yeah, they had some dips. Yeah, 2022 was their worst year in 6 years. It was their worst year, it looks like, in 2022. So that might have caused some fear because it was their worst year as far as profits in 6 years, but it was their highest employment count in 6 years. So as a CEO, you got to make tough decisions like that. And if you don't cut those jobs, sure, the money that the CEO made could have went to keeping those jobs, but all you're doing is creating a temporary solution for a long-term issue, right? So they're creating efficiencies. They're making a more stable company. And I feel like they did right by the employees. If they would have just cut them and these people couldn't pay their bills, that's one thing. But most of them kept getting paid for months after they were let go, had health benefits, were offered a severance package. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, are we really going to is this really that big of a issue, guys? I don't know, man. It's a tough one for me.
And then lays off 1,000 employees. I mean, I would say.
And I don't think these are corporate jobs, so these are careers for people. But unemployment is also low. It's 4%. So it's not like they kicked them to a market where they couldn't get a job. This is just life, in my opinion. And I don't see that much of a foul ball here.
I'd say that's super questionable.
Is there going to be a negative impact to laying off that many people? Probably. I would say morally, it doesn't sit super well with me making that kind of move. But I am going to reserve judgment on what happened because I haven't seen under the covers of how the company was run. And there's
that's a wise CEO who understands that issues like this are much more complex than employees will frame it, because employees don't have to worry about those issues. When they get home, they're good. Is their job stressful? Are they important as shit? Absolutely. And they deserve to be able to retire. They deserve to be able to have weekends off, take vacations, health benefits, all of these things. And they deserve to be able to work their way up, no matter where they're at. If they want to work their way up, if they want better opportunities, they can. And if they want to leave and open their own businesses, they should. And I think that's available to everybody.
There's a reason why they chose to pay him that much money, because they probably have a big problem that needed fixing, and it's a hard problem. Taking a lot of flack from the media for laying people off, making a whole bunch of structural changes, probably getting death threats.
I think that's an extensive pay package, frankly. I don't know the details of his past experience and what his accomplishments are and all that, but I will say just for the morale of Starbucks employees across the nation and the world alone, that's devastating to that. Starbucks locations on strike, trying to unionize, and
just without knowing anything related with this, I might judge this with people who look like just numbers. We live in a world where there's too many bosses instead of leaders.
I think when it comes to the role of a CEO, I don't think fair is ever the word. There's a lot of decisions that's made that's definitely not fair. To save a company of this magnitude, this is the route we're gonna unfortunately have to take, because the fact of the matter is, things change. Sometimes not making those hard decisions, and I've done that. I've held on to people too long, and it cost me a lot.
Sure.
Actually, I had to close a business because of it, and I should have laid people off a long time ago. If you don't have that back.
Yep, those are tough decisions nobody wants to make, bro. You are everybody's enemy because you have to make the toughest decisions, and it sucks, and it makes you lose sleep at night. That's most of things like this that happen, that CEOs and founders have to make these decisions. It's not fun. Stressful as shit.
Background on that understanding, people can't get past the 96 million.
Yeah.
Like anything else you're saying is blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
It's a lot.
All right, what are the values that drive your work and life?
For me, it's definitely my family. I mean, I do everything for them.
Good for you, my brother.
If it
That's
wouldn't
well.
be for them, I wouldn't be doing this. I would be doing something different.
You know, values, family, God, and personal growth. For me, through taking risks to grow.
Connection. If you're in a role for a long time, you've got younger people coming in and to basically replace you. It's really neat to have made it to the point where you can influence somebody.
I would never say the impact of what we do. You know, when I have customers, who say that this product changed their life, is huge. From a personal perspective, I was the first in my family to get a degree, first in my family to grow a multi-million-dollar company. And it just showed you that if you're dedicated, you can do it.
I've always admired hard work,
and she's a black woman, killing it. Good for you, man.
That's a value.
I don't like to make everything about race, but it shows, man, like you can do it, man. No matter what you look like, where you come from, it might, you might start from a harder, you might not have been dealt the best cards possible, but you can win with any hand.
Instilled in me as a kid, just don't half-ass anything.
I think it's a better attitude to believe that than the opposite. Half glass full, baby. God got you.
Give whatever you do your all.
One of the reasons why I'm an entrepreneur is I was just sick of making other people rich and working harder than them.
Yep.
I value being a good person and enriching the lives of others. Being an inspiration, providing a better place in the world, and doing good in the world, I think is incredibly important. I don't believe in stepping on people in order to succeed. All right, last card here. Has anything in this conversation changed how you see the pay gap or how we value different types of work?
I would say that I still stand by the fact that probably no CEO should make 200 times that of their median paid employee.
For one, the conversation's been incredibly interesting. I'm very happy to have been a part and meet you.
There's different levels of risk in everything that we do. And while we can call, different people blue-collar workers and things of that nature, there's still people who have huge responsibilities.
Just from this brief conversation, it's clear that you hold a good respect for your employees, and I hope that can continue. I hope that you can.
Let me ask you guys a question. So, if you had 1,000 employees, okay, one CEO, and this CEO was making 200 times the average employee, right? The median employee. Let's say that's $100,000 times 200, okay? So this CEO is earning $20 million a year, and the average employee is averaging $100,000. Are you guys against that? Okay. Now, let's say the company continues to grow. More locations continue to open. More jobs are created. Okay. And this goes from 1,000 people to 2,000 people making $100,000 a year. And the CEO still making $20 million. Would you be okay with that? And then it continues to grow, and now there's 3,000 employees making $100,000 a year, and the CEO's making $20 million. Would you guys be okay with that? Or should it be keep these 1,000 people and increase them to 300,000 a year, right? And don't create those jobs. And then as a matter of fact, let's go to 10 million for this CEO and let's increase everybody to $400,000. Is that a better alternative? Well, then we would never have an Amazon. We would never have a Tesla. We'd never have an Apple because it wouldn't ever scale. They're incentivized to scale this, to improve the quality of people's lives, not just how many jobs and how much employees are making. But I think if people can earn a living and they have health benefits and they have retirement and they're happy, I think that's how you measure it. I don't think you count other people's pockets because you don't know what this guy's doing to create that. And you don't know the amount of people that he's actually changing their lives and the direct benefits that consumers have because of this entire scenario. It's just much more complex than I think people say. You know, for this guy to just blanketly state nobody should make 200 more times than their median employee, I just don't think that's fair. I think there's scenarios where it makes sense, and you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. Cool. That was dope though, and it's kind of like on page with the topics that we've been talking about. All right, let's get back to stocks. Yesterday we watched How Does the Stock Market Work? So I want to check out the big secret for small investors. I know Joel Greenblatt, he wrote a few really good investment books, and the Swedish Investor, I paid him for coaching, and he coached me on how to value a company, how to find the valuation of a company, and how to invest in individual stocks long term. This guy has earned a 20% return for like the last decade. So he really knows what he's doing. I really enjoy his content, and I've learned a lot from him. So he reads a lot of investment books, and he's taught me a lot, not just through his content, but through a Zoom call that, you know, we spent a couple hours. He spent a couple hours teaching me this stuff. So let's watch this video. Maybe we can gain some new gems from it as investors.
Indeed, most individuals, MBAs, and professionals who try to beat the stock market won't. But if you follow the plan laid out in this video, you can. Yes, I know it sounds too good to be true, but there's a lot of statistical evidence that points to this fact, which we'll get to. So, hear me out. This is a top 5 takeaway summary of The Big Secret for the Small Investor, written by Joel Greenblatt. And this is the Swedish Investor, bringing you the best tips and tools for reaching financial freedom through stock market investing. Takeaway number 1. How to beat Warren Buffett. What strategy would you use to beat Michael Jordan? Well, you could just avoid
playing him.
playing him in basketball. This is the kind of advice that Joel Greenblatt gives to his students at Columbia Business School, an Ivy League school where he teaches investing. What does he mean?
Stop trying to compete with the market makers.
Let's take another example that might hit closer to home. How do you beat Warren Buffett? You challenge him to a running contest? No, that's just mean. There is a better way. You invest in small stocks. You just pick a league where Warren Buffett can't play. You know, he plays in the Diamond League. He must invest in giant companies like Apple and Nvidia and the likes.
Yeah.
But you can choose to dominate in bronze. The nice thing about investing is that it doesn't matter if you get your overperformance from small or large stocks. A 15% return is still a 15% return, no matter where it was achieved. Over time, if you compound for a couple of years, you'll be forced to graduate and move up the ranks. But right now, you have a significant advantage by being small. How small do you need to go?
You know when you've got a big idea. The problem is, for us, is that big now really means big. It has to be billions of dollars to move the needle very much at Berkshire.
So, if you don't want to go head-to-head with Buffett, look at the stocks where he isn't interested anymore. He simply can't put meaningful amounts of money in there. Any company...
There's companies that are too small, right? So Buffett has a shit ton of money. He's outgrown the majority of stocks. And so if he, like, buying a $1 billion company is just too small. Even if he bought the entire company, that's too small for him. So he has to play in bigger ponds. But the better opportunity is in those small to mid-cap stocks that he can't play in anymore. There's better growth opportunities. But he also can't play in that anymore because he has so much money. He also doesn't want to take the risk to just be buying a whole bunch of small companies. And I don't think legally he can even do that. He'd be creating monopolies left and right. So maybe I'm wrong here.
Company with a market cap lower than 1 billion seems to fall within that category. And that still leaves plenty of opportunity, you know, like 826 companies in Sweden alone. So it's a huge playing field for the smaller investor. It's not just that you'll avoid the big fish by applying this strategy. It's also that you get more opportunities to choose from. And as we shall see, that's really beneficial in and of itself too. Takeaway number 2. The lazy man's approach to valuing stocks. The secret to successful investing is figuring out the value of something and then paying a lot less. The father of value investing and Warren Buffett's mentor, Benjamin Graham, called this investing with a margin of safety. The greater the distance between the price you are paying and the value you are getting, the larger the margin of safety. If you insist on getting a large margin of safety when buying, a lot can go wrong before you are selling and you'll still end up on top. But how does one value a stock? A difficult but correct way of doing it is by looking at discounted cash flows. A company is worth the money it can pay out to its owners from today until Judgment Day, after you consider that money today is worth more than money tomorrow. Let me explain. Swedish Sundays is a franchise earning $1 million per year. We know it will continue to do this for 30 more years, and then it will be gone.
And it's gone.
Don't ask why. So, is Swedish Sundays worth 30 million? 1 million per year times 30 years equals to 30 times 1? Not quite, because 1 million today is worth more than 1 million next year, which is worth more than 1 million the year after that, and so on. How much more? It's got a lot to do with where interest rates are at, but let's say 6% or more. That's Greenblatt's minimum. He will use a higher number if interest rates are higher than that.
Wait.
With a 6% discount rate, if interest 6% or more. That's Greenblatt's minimum. He will use a higher number if it's how much more?
Discount
it's
rate,
got a lot to do with where interest rates are at, but let's say 6% or more. That's Greenblatt's minimum. He will use a higher number if interest rates are higher than that. With a 6% discount rate, Swedish Sundays is worth $14.1 million. But it is not that simple. Remember, I told you how much Swedish Sundays would earn over the next 30 years. Are you really going to trust my predictions about a business earnings over 30 whole years? Remember, I'm just a YouTuber who doesn't even know that Benjamin Franklin has never been a US president. Actually, forget about 30 years. in the real world, most analysts have a hard time predicting a business earnings during the next quarter. The good thing is that as everyone finds this exercise difficult, it becomes like a test in college where you are graded based on your percentile. Getting 55% right might get you an A and earn you a shitload of money. And because no one can do this 30-year thing with any accuracy, Greenblatt suggests we scrap it and do something easier with opportunity costs instead. It works something like this. How much does Jupiter weigh? I don't know, and I'm not sure that anyone knows exactly. But does it weigh more than Pluto? That's easier. How many times can Captain America get hit and still get up? 1, 2, 3. I just don't know. It's a difficult question. But can he take more punishment than, say, Loki?
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Damn.
Puny god.
Similarly, it might not be easy to say exactly how much a specific company is worth, but it's easier to say if one is relatively more attractive than another. First, we must make sure that it beats the before-mentioned 6% or the 10-year Treasury yield. If the stock we're looking at can even beat the US Treasury, which is seen as pretty much a risk-free investment, then why should we bother with it? Currently, the 10-year Treasury is 4.3%, so we'll use 6% as our opportunity cost.
Damn. Look what it was in the 1980s. Like, interest rates for a home were insane, but literally just pour your money into US Treasuries and you're making over 15%. Crazy.
Let's see if, say, Apple can beat that. It's been growing 7% per year over the past 10 years and 8% over the last 5. It's earning something like $100 billion per year, which is pretty much all cash. So that's a yield of approximately 3% on current valuations. Apple must grow like this for another 10 years or so before reaching the 6% yield we are looking for, which, in my world at least, is not a given. So, at current valuations, I'd say that Apple doesn't pass the first test. If it had been around PE 20 or below, like it was a couple of years ago, I would have given it a pass. Secondly, we compare all stocks that pass the first test to each other. Greenblatt has 2 metrics he is especially interested in, which we'll get to soon. Takeaway number 3. Index investing is flawed. And we can do better. You've probably heard that it's challenging to beat the market. And it isn't easy to find managers who beat the market either. So, the odds are you'll do better by just buying the index. But market cap weighted index funds are fundamentally flawed. Look at this graph. When was the best time to buy Disney during the last 3 years? Yep, that's right. When it was the cheapest. When was the worst time? Yep, when it was the most expensive. What do you think the index funds did? They bought more Disney when it was expensive and less when it was cheap. Think about it like this. If Disney was X% of some index when it was cheap, it might have been 1.5x% when it was expensive. When new money reaches the index fund, it bought 50% more Disney at the peak than at the bottom, as a portion of the whole. Suppose you don't believe in the efficient market theory. In that case, you've accepted that the bipolar Mr. Market sometimes gets too optimistic and sometimes too pessimistic. One example when he was overly optimistic about IT companies was during the dot-com bubble. And what did an index fund do during that time? IT made up a much bigger part of index funds portfolios than both before and after the bubble. One example of when Mr. Market was overly pessimistic arrived shortly after, right after the horrible 9/11 attacks. Mr. Market wouldn't touch airline stocks with a 10-foot pole. and index funds shied away from them. But that, too, was a mistake.
A market cap weighted index, if a stock is overpriced, it buys too much of it automatically. And if it's underpriced, it buys too little of it automatically. So it sounds crazy, but it actually is systematically doing the wrong thing at every point.
We don't even need to know which stocks that are overpriced and which ones that are underpriced. We just need to know that some stocks are mispriced relative to their fair value. It follows that index funds will buy too much of the overpriced ones and too little of the bargains. A straightforward solution to this problem is to equal weigh our portfolio. This way, sure, we'll accidentally buy some of the overpriced stocks at times, but at least these errors aren't systematic. Another way is to use weights based on fundamentals, such as book value, sales, earnings, or cash flows. There are funds out there with quite low fee structures that can do this for us, by the way. One study called Myths About Fundamental Indexing from 2018 shows that such other forms of indexing overperforms traditional market cap weighing by some 2.7 to 4.5% per year. This study was conducted on 3,300 stocks over 25 years. However, Greenblatt thinks we can do one better. By the way, if you are interested in joining me on my stock market journey, a journey that has returned 16.8% per year over almost 12 years, head over to my Patreon. There's full transparency of what's in the portfolio, and you'll get deep dives on every portfolio company, explaining how I
was 20
think
when I
about
started learning from
individual
him.
stocks. Takeaway number 4. Create your own value index. Remember that I said earlier that valuing a stock is tough and that choosing between two alternatives is typically easier.
Yeah.
You've probably heard Warren Buffett say that
It makes more sense, as we pointed out, to buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price.
well, both Buffett and Greenblatt obviously prefer to get it both cheap and wonderful. How does one determine if a stock is cheap? There are plenty of alternatives, but one of the simplest ones is to compare how much it costs to how much it earns. That's the company's PE. Apple currently has a PE of 33, and Google has a PE of 18. Google is cheaper. Simple. But what does Buffett mean by a wonderful business?
What we really want to do is buy a business that's a great business, which means a business is going to earn a high return on capital employed for a very long period of time, and where we think the management will treat us right.
This one requires a little bit more accounting knowledge to understand, and I won't go into the details right now. I'll just leave 2 common alternative ways of measuring this on the screen for you to check later, if you are interested. The main point is this. We can rank stocks based on both how cheap they are and how good they are, and then buy the ones with the best combined ranking. In this way, we'll create our own value index. By the way, this is a version of Joel Greenblatt's magic formula, and if you want a how-to on this ranking system, have a look at my summary of his book, The Little Book That Beats the Market. Greenblatt backtested this during 1990 to 2010. It made 13.9% per year compounded versus 7.9% for the Russell 1000 and 7.6% for the S&P 500. That's a big overperformance. If you'd start with $10,000, you'd end up with $135,000 in the value index, and only about $45,800 and $43,300 in the Russell and the S&P.
Wow.
So, market cap weighted indexes beat most active managers. Equal weighted indexes and fundamentally weighted ones beat market cap weighted ones. But value weighted indexes beat them all.
That's crazy.
Takeaway number 5. Tie yourself to the mast.
He's not as tough as he thinks. Neither are we.
This is the voice of the experienced, and in the stock market, it's advice that we should heed. Entire books have been written on behavior finance, concluding that we are hardwired to be lousy investors. We fear loss much more than we enjoy gains. When living on the savannas in Africa, it was reasonable to run from the lion and ask questions later. But when we do this in the stock market, we're just another lemming on the way towards slaughter. And for professional investors, it is even worse. Looking at the top 25% performing managers during the first decade of the 2000s, almost half of them spent at least one 3-year period in the bottom 10%. Could you hold on during such downswings? Most people can't. So it's even worse for professional investors, because even if they can manage to keep a long-term vision, most of their clients can't. Without clients, you have no business. This is becoming a bigger problem for money managers because the rise of technology has made it so easy for clients to monitor returns, even on a daily basis. When clients get more and more short-sighted, they will make money managers more and more short-sighted. And when everyone is more short-sighted, the payoff for taking the long-term view is even greater.
People have a very short-term horizon. And, the big secret for the small investor is that they can keep a long-term horizon.
So, what does Joel Greenblatt suggest that we small investors should do to combat our flawed investing genetics? Here's the plan. Let's develop a strategy that can help us avoid making our mistakes. At the same time, let's assume that others will keep making their share. We should tie ourselves to the mast beforehand, like Odysseus did when facing the sirens. For starters, we don't fiddle with this value index every day. You make one rebalancing per year, and that's it. Set aside a full day, and then do not log into your brokerage account more than once per month or so. You'll still want to have your broker alert you in the case of a corporate event, though. You don't want to miss out on a buyout or something. Secondly, Greenblatt suggests putting 40 to 80% of one's money in stocks. Decide on a number beforehand. Say,
most people don't put 10% of their money in stocks. This man said 40 to 80% to stocks.
80%. Now, you can change this number to 70% or 90%, up or down a maximum of 10%, but only once yearly. This way, we give ourselves some wiggle room, because we are no machines. However, we still get most of the benefits from investing in a value-weighted index. And here's the big secret. If we follow this plan, small investors like us will have a huge advantage over professionals. An advantage that has only been growing larger every year. So, beat the professionals by investing in smaller stocks. Use opportunity cost when deciding on which stocks to pick. Index investing is flawed because it systematically buys too much overvalued stuff and too little undervalued stuff. You can create your very own value index by buying companies that have a low PE and a high return on capital. The secret for the small investor is that we can keep a long-term horizon in a world that is gradually losing its attention span. Joel Greenblatt likes to joke that
I might need to lock in, and because currently all I do is I invest in QQQ, VOO, and then I sell puts. I buy call options on individual stocks that I like, on good companies that I like. Just because I'm not trying to get rich overnight. I'm not, the way that I'm funding my account isn't by finding value stocks. It's by paying attention to my own businesses, which I have a lot of stocks in, right? Building those businesses and then taking the cash flow from my small businesses, putting it into indexes where it's a little bit more stable, it's diversified, and I can create cash flow by selling puts and buying covered calls. Now, learning what I've learned in this book, what I decided to do was come over to Fidelity and use their stock screener. And so what I did was I found market caps of small companies, small to mid-sized companies, with a PE ratio from 9 to 21, with a forward EPS long-term growth 3 to 5 years from now of 10% and above, The revenue, I didn't select this. I thought I selected this. Oh, I didn't select this. Oh yeah, I didn't select that because I thought it was going to be percentage revenue growth. I did EPS growth of 10% or more, cash flow growth of 11% or more, and that gave me 18 companies to look at. And so I've been looking at these companies, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at their financials. So I looked at Boot Barn, and it was okay. And what you can do when you do this research is you can take notes of each of these stock tickers. And when you see a stock ticker that you like, a company that you actually like, you add it to your wish list, or you star it, right? Or you write it down and you keep track of it. Okay, so Boot Barn, it was okay. Then I looked at Super Microcomputer. Which one am I at right now? Oh, okay. So this is BKR, but let's just do one from scratch. All right, this is Mr. Cooper Group. This is Coop. Okay, so I'm gonna head over to Qualtrim, which was what I use to do research on companies. That's not it. What did I? No, it's not that one. It's not that one. It's Coop. All right, so let's look up Coop. And there's Coop, and we can look at the financials now of this company. And it's not beautiful. The price is climbing up. No, I don't day trade at all. I don't like day trading at all. You know, that's not investing. That's another job. I got plenty of jobs. I make my cash flow. I make my money from my main thing. When I was a barber, that's what I focused on. I was making 6 figures as a barber, living below my means, using the margin to invest it into real estate and into businesses. And in the cash flow that I got from my businesses and from my real estate, I put it into securities like this. And so you have 3 layers there of cash flow, so you can operate without desperation, right? I'm not loving this company off rip because the price of the stock keeps going up. Revenue is going down. Quarterly, the revenue is all over the place. EBITDA is all over the place. Let's go back to annual. Free cash flow is negative. Net income is all over the place. EPS is all over the place. I don't love it. There's debt of a tune of $5 billion on a company that is negative in free cash flow. When are they going to pay it back? In net income, they're $700 million. So even if they, took all of their net income and put it into paying debt, it would take 7-8 years to pay off the debt. Now, this is a good sign. They're buying back stocks. That's a good sign. But the valuation keeps going up. And so, of all the opportunities that are out there, this probably isn't a stock that I'm going to buy, even though it says their growth has been amazing every year. Okay, let's keep looking. What is this shit? I don't like that one. What is this? It's all downgraded. These are all shit stocks. Let's check out Thor, THO. I think these are, I think Thor is RVs, right? All right, so let's look at this company. This company is okay. You're seeing some growth. This was from the pandemic, obviously. Can't really count that. The price is super down, which is a good sign, especially since, the revenues keep going down even since the pandemic. Let's look at quarterly. Is it going up? It's going down quarterly. EBITDA is way down. Free cash flow is gone. Are they turning this business around because they're buying back stocks? They don't have much expenses, but every few years, I wonder why. We'd have to learn more about this industry. And again, I'm not loving it. They're losing employees. They're not growing. I'm not loving that one either. So every now and then you can find diamonds in the rough of companies that you really like, right? So one of them might be Boot Barn. So let's look at Boot Barn. I never even heard of Boot Barn. But Boot Barn, if you look at it annually, this is a good sign. The stock price is down from $180. It's climbing back up to 110. Okay. But revenues keep growing. Let's look at quarterly. quarterly revenues keep growing. And then if we scroll down, they got a bunch of free cash flow. They're profitable as a company, even though it's dropping a little bit. Um, Debt wise, they don't have much debt, even though they have leases. They get a return on capital. The valuation is down, which is what they believe the company's worth, which means it's probably a deal. You can see the PE's at 20. At its peak last year in September, it was at 34 almost. We can look at expenses and we can see that, you know, operation expenses is 372 million. Marketing and sales is 44 million. Capital expenditure is 118, but that's not ongoing. So they don't have a highly expensed company. This is a great business. Let's look at their website. What kind of business is this? Oh, it's Boot Barn. So I might go to a store and see if the store is cool, if I like it. You know, this ain't my style of products, but I can see this being great. $600 boots. Damn, boy. But it's obviously a good business, and it's been a good business for a long time. Then I would want to know who the CEO is, and I would want to learn from the CEO. Let's see if the CEO has press conferences, anything like that, that we might be able to learn from. And so, look, if you come here to YouTube, you can listen to the CEO on
experience
a podcast.
Because, you know, stores aren't just an afterthought or a slowly declining business or.
So we can get an idea if the CEO is cool. You know how we were criticizing CEOs earlier? Is this the type of CEO that I want to support? That I believe in, that I think will steer this company in the right direction. Why aren't we checking for what the employees think? Well, because they're not steering the ship. What's more important, even as a small investor, is what the CEO is thinking, because they're the head of the body. And so we're going to look at that. But another thing that we can look at is we can go to earnings calls. So let's look up Boot Barn's earnings calls. This was the latest one, and we can see what the financial performance is. It increased by 17%. Man, it's booming. They opened 13 new stores. So they have 438 stores across 46. The company plans to do 21 additional stores. E-commerce sales grew to 11%. They're on target to do 60 new stores every year. They have effective inventory management. The future outlook, 460 million, with the same store sales projection to increase. If they don't grow any more stores, they still think they're going to increase by 8%, which we know they're increasing stores, which in the next few years, I see this company growing. Now, it doesn't matter if the company grows if nobody else knows about it. So we need to see what kind of volume is here. What are people saying on YouTube about Boot Barn? Let's go to Google search terms, I think it is. I'm sorry, Google Trends I like to do, right? And let's see if people even talk about Boot Barn. And you guys can see it's got a lot of traction here. And over time, I mean, it was really, really growing on these days. But let's go broader, because that's just a couple of days out, right? That's just the past day. Let's look at the past 90 days. It's very, very consistent. It's up and down. I wonder why it's up and down. But you guys can see skyrocketed here. I wonder why. But it's still on an up trajectory, and it's holding steady. These are the states that love it the most. You know, we can get an idea that this is a good company, and it seems to be trending. All right. And then we can compare it to a competitor, like who's a boot competitor? What's the one that my wife buys from all the time? Starts with a T. Tacova. Let's look up Tacova. My wife has 3 pair of boots from Tecovas. And Tecovas is booming, and Boot Barn has more volume. That's a great sign. Okay, so I like the financials at Boot Barn. The price is right at Boot Barn. I will write them down, Boot, because there's plenty of growth potential here as a small to mid cap stock. Okay, so I will write them down, and I'll jot whatever notes about the company that I want to. And then what I'll do is I'll look at a bunch of different companies that I actually enjoy. And then I'll compare them, which one's the better opportunities, and then I'll make a decision based on that. It's a long-term investment in a great company. So that's the simple way of putting it. Obviously, there's more to it. But the more research you're doing, the more you're learning. It just depends on what you're consuming. Because the very next video, we can watch this, Warren Buffett's interpretation of financial statements. To learn more, when we're looking at this stuff, this is Apple's financials. When we're looking at this stuff, right, and we can compare, we know Apple's a great buy. Look at this shit, man. It is down. Is Apple scary right now with tariffs and stuff like that? Yeah, that's why the price is down. But this is the time you start buying great companies, when people are fearful and you hold them long term, okay? But let's look at what Warren Buffett considers good financials. And then we'll take a look at a certain stock based on the information that we learned from this video right here.
The richest men in the world. One of the key components to his multi-billionaire success has been his ability to buy companies with a sustainable competitive advantage. Think Coca-Cola, Moody's, or See's Candy. For this video, we are going to see if we can mimic his success on how to make money by learning how to identify companies with such sustainable competitive advantages. More specifically, we are going to learn how to do this by analyzing stock market companies' financial statements, the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. This is a top 5 takeaways video of Warren Buffett and the Interpretation of Financial Statements, written by Mary Buffett and David Clark. Warren Buffett can't emphasize enough how important it is for an investor to be able to understand these statements. He says that they are the language of business, and even goes as far as saying that if you don't understand them, you have no business investing in individual stocks.
Yes, sir.
But,
and by the way, guys, if you're self-employed, let's say you're a barber or you're a hairstylist or you're a massage therapist, whatever it may be. If you're self-employed and you have an accountant, you should be getting profit and loss statements. You start with your own financials. Even if you have a job, even if you have a 9-to-5, you start with your own personal finances, organizing them, cleaning them up, looking at what matters. And when you can read those financials, then it makes it easier to understand the financials of a company.
But don't worry, digesting financial statements can be a lot of fun. At least Warren Buffett himself thinks so, as he says that, "Other guys read Playboy. I read annual reports." This man has his priorities straight.
Part of the problem is like there's so many men that worship lust and worship a bunch of shit that really ain't gonna do nothing for their life more than they do things like this. Like look at these companies like you look at your sports teams. You know, Warren Buffett's the head coach, and then you got star players.
Takeaway
there you go.
Number 1. Consistency is king. Warren Buffett is notorious for saying that the best holding period for an investment is forever. Here's a quick quiz. Which product do you think is more likely to be popular still in 2050? A. Coca-Cola, which has been popular for at least 120 years and has remained basically the same product for the whole duration. B. Snapchat, which has been popular for about 7 years. The answer is quite obvious. When Warren Buffett is looking for investments with a sustainable competitive advantage, he wants to see consistency.
And the reason why that answer is obvious is because we know apps are very volatile with competition and with technology and innovation. Sometimes apps don't last, right? But we know Coca-Cola has made it through world wars, right? Through many wars, and thrived and done well during those scenarios. So, yeah.
In earnings, consistent low debt, consistently growing earnings, consistently low spending in capital expenditures and R&D, consistent profitability, etc. To look at the last 10-year period is a good start, but as in the case of Coca-Cola, the longer the company has been proving its durability, the better. Selling the same product for many years, such as Coca-Cola has done, has a great advantage for you as the stock owner. It reduces costs by a lot. It reduces production costs as the need to upgrade machinery decreases. It reduces marketing costs as marketing efforts are cumulative. It reduces costs for research and development. Duh. It lowers the training cost of employees. Yep. It reduces the risk of having obsolete inventory. And when costs are reduced by a lot, it means a lot more money in the pockets of shareholders. Not only are the costs reduced in these companies, but you'll be able to experience compound interest tax-free when your holding period is forever, which is something that has made Warren Buffett awfully rich during the last 50 years. Takeaway number 2. What Warren Buffett is looking for in an income statement. To illustrate what Buffett looks for, we will use one of his more recent and largest investments, Apple. First and foremost, I will assume that you know some basics about financial statements. If you don't, head over to my summary of The Interpretation of Financial Statements by Benjamin Graham for some Investing 101. Let's start out by having a look at the bottom line to confirm what we talked about in the previous takeaway. The net earnings of the company has shown great consistency over the last 10 years. Fair enough, it doesn't have the track record of Coca-Cola, and neither are its products as durable, in my opinion.
So that's Apple, right? This is Apple's net income. You can see it's consistently grown. Not as good as some other companies. Like if we go look at NVIDIA, look how beautiful this looks, right? It is, oof. Look at their revenues. Oof. What's another one? Maybe let's check Let's check Tesla. Look at Tesla's revenues. Look at their, where is it? Their net income and but you get the gist. The revenues, it looks amazing. They're profitable, right? Apple's actually looks really good. And then let's check Amazon. Look how sexy Amazon's is. And the price is super down. You know, from its highs. AWS growth rate is low. Customer commitments is growing. EBITDA is growing. Look at their net income growth. Nothing but growth. So it's interesting. I wonder what happened in 2022. I'd have to look it up. I would just chat GPT that to find out. But let's go back to the video.
Opinion. But the iPhone has looked quite similar since its release in 2007. Moreover, the earnings of Apple have grown at a steady pace. Another thing that Warren Buffett wants to see in his investments is a consistent and high gross margin. As a rule of thumb, you'd want to see a margin of 40% plus. We can see that Apple just makes the cut here. It's always interesting to compare with competitors as well. So, as a point of reference, Samsung had a gross margin of 45.7% in 2018, and Huawei had a margin of 38.6%. Having a high gross margin typically says something about the scalability of the business, meaning that the more the company sells, the greater the profitability becomes. This is the trait that you'd want to see in any business that you own.
Facts.
Finally, we want to compare the bottom line to the top line and calculate the net margin. Companies with a durable competitive advantage have higher net margins than their competitors. Apple beats both Samsung and Huawei in this regard. And here's another rule of thumb. A net margin of 20% or higher is typically a very strong result, revealing that we are dealing with a smoothly run business. Takeaway number 3. What Warren Buffett is looking for in the balance sheet. Next up is the balance sheet. Warren Buffett...
So remember how I told you guys companies are happy with like 10% profit margins? You can see Amazon's profit margins right here, and you can see their profit margins 10%. Let's see what Apple's is. %, crushing it. Tesla's, let's see what Tesla's is. 6.7%. Usually cars don't have the best profit margin. See what Nvidia is. Usually tech companies have amazing profit margins, but they have heavy R&D. So great. That's why tech companies usually have much higher price to earnings ratios. So what a great company. And the price is down. Got to buy some more Nvidia.
Buffett likes to look at a figure called retained earnings. The figure is being added to or withdrawn from each year depending on if the company is reinvesting its net income or not. Buffett typically likes to see a steady growth here, meaning that the business is profitable and that it identifies good reinvesting opportunities. If we look at Berkshire Hathaway's retained earnings, for example, we see a very strong growth during the last decade. Apple doesn't really fulfill the criterion regarding retained earnings, but one must also take into consideration that starting in 2013, Apple began a quite extensive dividends and share repurchase program. We'll get to this in the next takeaway. To measure how efficient a company is using these reinvested earnings, return on equity can typically be used. To calculate this, we must revisit the income statement and compare the net income to the total equity of the company. Apple is showing a lot of strength in this regard, which is partly an effect of distributing so much of the earnings to shareholders, but also a sign of a business with a durable competitive advantage. As a comparison, Samsung and Huawei aren't even half as profitable. In his 1983 shareholder letter, Warren Buffett suggests a somewhat more sophisticated approach towards measuring how efficient a company is using its capital. He suggests that one should calculate the so-called return on net tangible assets. More on this in the essays of Warren Buffett. A third thing to notice is that the exceptional business seldom requires a lot of debt to expand, banks perhaps being the exception. Because usually, it can just use the strong cash flow from the business.
Yep.
Therefore,
that's what I be
look
trying
for
to tell
businesses
people.
with little to no long.
We live in a world where everything is raising capital, everything is getting SBA loans, all this stuff. But a lot of times, man, if you a great business, I started Tomb 45. We started it with $13,000. That's what we started Tomb 45. It does multiple 7 figures annually, and so, and with no debt, with no loans, with no investors, we just used the strong cash flow, kept reinvesting it, and that company grew into something substantial. Same thing for Pye County, same thing for FFC, same thing for headlines, same shit. A great business is going to grow.
Long-term debt. If a company can pay off all its long-term debt with less than 4 years of earnings, it's in quite a good position. Apple clearly fulfills this criterion, and its competitors do too. Takeaway number 4. What Warren Buffett is looking for in a cash flow statement. Finally, the third financial statement that you must dive into is the cash flow statement. A cash flow statement differs from an income statement in that it represents actual ins and outs of money, while the income statement is a measure of financial performance. Yes, I will probably make a video of its own about this in the future. Comment, I want it, down below if you want such a video. For now, it's enough that you know that one important figure is the capital expenditures. This is money being spent on properties, plant, and equipment primarily. Look at what percentage capital expenditures are of net earnings. You want them to be as low as possible. Lower than 25% over a period of time is considered very good, and less than 50% is acceptable. There are exceptions though, such as when a company is making a
So less than 50% is acceptable, less than 25% is ideal. So if we go to, this is Starbucks. Their expenses are about $1.1 billion, 1.1 to $1.2 billion. Okay. And their, what was it? Was it net income, he said? Their net income, if I can find it, $384 million. Their revenue is $8.76 billion. Their EBITDA is $1 billion. It's rough. But they're buying back shares. They're paying dividends. Oh no, I'm sorry. Their capex is $589 million. G&A is I mean, that's operating expenses. But their capex is $589. They said they want less than 25%. Let me see. Did he say revenues?
20 you want them to be as low as possible. Lower than 25% of you want them to be as low as possible. Lower than 25% over a period of time is considered very good, and less than 50% is acceptable. What percentage capital expenditures are of net earnings?
Net earnings.
You want them to be as low as possible. Lower than 25% over a period of time is considered very good, and less than 50% is acceptable. There are exceptions though, such as when a company's
Yeah, so net earnings and net income. If we go back to Starbisky's, okay, that's Nvidia. Let's just do Nvidia. Nvidia's net income is $72 billion, and their expenses, capex, is $3 billion. Oh, this is a great company, boy. according to this video.
Company's making a one-time payment to grow the business. Look at what the company is using the money for. Apple does very well here. In almost every year, they had capital expenses at less than 25%. The same thing can't be said about its competitors.
Yeah.
Also, in the cash flow statement, we can see the reasons why the retained earnings from the balance sheet haven't been growing much since 2012. Apple has been distributing a lot of cash to its shareholders. The so-called augmented payout ratio, which includes share buybacks as well as dividends, has been higher than 100% during some years, which basically means that Apple is distributing more money than it earns. Takeaway number 5. When to sell. As I've talked about before, one of Warren Buffett's key concepts on how to invest in stocks successfully is to hold on to your investments forever. Still though, there are 3 instances when you might consider selling your stock. 1. You need more money for an even better investment. At times, perhaps especially in bear markets, there are so many opportunities to go around that you must consider switching from something that is great to something that is exceptional. In 1974, Warren Buffett said this, noting that a lot of stocks were undervalued. I felt like an oversexed guy in a harem. 2. When a company may lose its competitive advantage. Times are changing. For example, the once monopoly-like characteristics of the local newspapers are now being disrupted by online media. If one of your investments face a risk of this kind, it may be time to cut it loose. 3. During crazy bull markets. Even a fantastic business can be a bad investment if you must acquire it at a crazy price. And likewise, there are times when you can improve your personal finances by selling a fantastic business at such a price, if you are already holding on to one. Mary Buffett and David Clark suggest that at a PE ratio of 40 or higher, you should start consider selling your stocks. even if you believe in the underlying economics of the company. And that's it. A quick summary. When you are looking for a business with a durable competitive advantage, the keyword is consistency. In the income statement, look for consistently growing net earnings and profit margins that consistently beat the competitors. When observing...
Yeah, so I like that. One thing that I learned from this is, when you're looking at these good companies that you want to invest in, and I don't usually buy individual stocks, again, because I pour my money into my own businesses, my own stocks that I have control of. And then I buy indexes, I sell puts, and then I'll buy, and I'll do covered calls on stocks that I love, right? And so you do have to buy stocks on those individual companies that you do love if you want to do covered calls. But I do the prerequisites first. So I'm not trying to build a portfolio of a bunch of companies, I guess is the point I'm making. Nonetheless, we can do it. It's just going to be a smaller percentage. I'm still going to have indexes. And, one thing that I learned here is, look, if you, like we were looking at the boot, what is it? At Boot Barn, right? We were looking at this company right here at Boot Barn. I'm going to look at other public companies that are in the same industry, in the same sector, and as close as possible to the same product. And I'm going to look at their financials, compare it, because there's an opportunity cost with every decision that you make. So if I'm looking at Boot, I wonder if there's a way that I can find comparable companies. Stocks similar to Boot. And so you're going to have stuff like this, like Gap, Floor & Decor, like those aren't really as comparable as I would like. I'd like to find something even similar. But it's clothing, it's clothing brands, stuff like that. So it's close enough. Look, Burlington stores. Oh, the Buckle might be one, Abercrombie and Fitch. So let's check out Buckle and let's see what they're looking like. And so if we look at their financials, hell to the nah, they bankrupt. We buying Boot. Nah, just play. Yeah, that was cool, man. That was very enlightening. I learned some stuff there. I hope you guys did too. Guys, that's it for today. I'm going to stop live streaming. I might live stream a little bit later. Who knows? But I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. I learned a lot. We dove into current events, into politics, into stocks, and into not really debating, but the first thing that we looked at was reacting to a guy's video. So, all right, man, y'all take care. Have a good one. Thanks for jumping on this live. I'll see y'all tomorrow.